Good evening. Thank you for coming to the City of Tacoma Parks City Council meeting. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Searcy.
Here.
Councilmember Fulcher.
Present.
Councilmember DeBala.
Present.
Councilmember Gibson.
Here.
Councilmember Siemens.
Present.
Councilmember Honsack.
Present.
Councilmember Small.
Rock on.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much for joining us tonight. We will have a quick agenda change. We will start this evening with a proclamation acknowledging February as Black History Month. We also will have a swearing in of Michael Miller, who will be joining the Ethics Commission, followed by our legislative update, public comments, council comments, city manager comments. We do not have any minutes for tonight, so we will not be covering that. And then we will have 2 work sessions this evening. The first is Sustainable Maryland Committee recommendations, and the second is a Sustainability Manager Program update. In terms of upcoming agendas, on Wednesday, February the 14th, is Valentine's Day, and the City Council will be honoring everyone for Valentine's Day by meeting to discuss city business with love. So on Wednesday, February the 14th, we will have a council meeting. We will have a tentative vote to convene in closed session at 6:30, and for matters related to collective bargaining, we will reconvene at 7:30 p.m. And during that meeting, we will have 2 work sessions, quarterly financial report for the second quarter, the FY 2024 budget amendment number 3, and we will be tentatively, let me make sure I have the right version, tentatively discussing funding options for the Recreation Center redevelopment. Monday, February the 19th is President's Day. City offices and facilities are closed Sunday and Monday for the President's Day holiday. On Wednesday, February the 21st, the City Council will have its regular meeting at 7:30. During that meeting, we'll have a legislative update. Voting session will be the first reading ordinance approving the FY 2024 budget amendment number 3. Discussion of amending the city code to add a ban on gasoline-powered leaf blowers. And tentatively, the 21st. And tentatively, the library construction project update. On Wednesday, February the 28th, the council will meet at 7:30. We will have a legislative update, voting session on the second reading ordinance approving the FY 2024 budget amendment number 3, as well as a tentative work session on a proposed housing construction tax credit. And that will take us into March. On Thursday, February the 29th through Friday, March the 1st, will be the Maryland Mayors Association Winter Conference, and I will be attending. With that, we're going to move on to our first item for this evening, and that is the proclamation of February as Black History Month. Black History Month. Whereas during Black History Month, we reflect on the sacrifices and celebrate the many achievements and significant contributions made by African Americans to our economic, cultural, spiritual, and political development. And whereas the 2024 national theme for observance is African Americans and the arts, spanning the many impacts African Americans have had on visual arts, music, cultural movements, and more. And whereas the City of Tacoma Park recognizes that racial and ethnic diversity enriches our community and acknowledges the challenges that African Americans face in achieving equity, opportunity, and social mobility. And whereas we also recognize Tacoma Park's own history of segregation, racial covenants, and discrimination that contributed to lower rates of home ownership and lower incomes in the city's Black community. And whereas diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging are priorities for the city, and we are committed to working with our community to eradicate racism in all forms, to provide an inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable future for all. Now, therefore, I, Talisha Searcy, Mayor of the City of Tacoma Park, do hereby proclaim February 2024 as Black History Month in the City of Tacoma Park and encourage all residents this month and throughout the year to learn, observe, celebrate, and honor Black history and culture. And with that, we have a swearing in this evening. So I'm going to ask for Michael Miller to please come on down. The Constitution of the United States.
That I will support the Constitution of the United States.
And that I will be faithful.
And that I will be faithful.
And bear true allegiance.
And bear true allegiance.
To the state of Maryland.
To the state of Maryland.
And support the Constitution.
And support the Constitution.
And laws thereof.
And laws thereof.
And that I will.
And that I will.
To the best of my skill and judgment.
To the best of my skill and judgment.
Diligently and faithfully.
Diligently and faithfully.
Without partiality or prejudice.
Without partiality or prejudice.
Execute the office.
Execute the office.
Of Ethics Commissioner for the City of Tacoma Park.
Execute the office of Ethics Commissioner for the City of Tacoma Park.
In the state of Maryland.
And the state of Maryland.
According to the Constitution.
According to the Constitution.
And laws of this state.
And laws of the state.
And the charter.
And the charter.
And code.
And code.
Of the City of Tacoma Park.
Of the City of Tacoma Park.
Congratulations.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, congratulations, Michael Miller. We appreciate your service. Okay. So now we're going to move into our legislative update. Wonderful. Ann is here. So we are joined by Ann Seacott, who is our a lobbyist in Annapolis. So with that, Ann, you could take it away.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everybody. So the news tonight is reflective of something I mentioned last week and can confirm tonight that it looks like we really will have a record number of bills introduced this year. We are up to over 1,100 Senate bills, which by the filing deadline is very high. I don't know if it's an absolute record, but it's close if it's not. And we are already at almost 1,300 House bills and expect that we'll see several hundred more before the end of this week with the filing deadline being tomorrow night. So we should see several hundred bills on Friday. So just to let you know, there's a lot going on. So with that, a couple of the bills that have dropped recently of interest to the city include, finally, on the environmental front, the big climate change bill, the RENEW Act. There's also another one that Delegate Charkoudian is looking for some support for, which is called the Warmth Act. And that stands for Working for Accessible Renewable Maryland Thermal Heat. So the acronym is WARMTH. And it's about trying to develop some pilots for geothermal networking. So it sounds kind of interesting. So that's going on. We talked a little bit about housing bills. We do have Delegate Janelle Wilkins' Just Cause legislation being heard next week. Mayor Searcy will be testifying in support of that. And I think I had mentioned that the governor has a package of bills, one in support of renters, and two really focused more on housing development itself. And I think there are there's just a lot of interest in those bills and several others related to housing issues. Wanted to mention on the development front that there is a $200,000 legislative bond initiative that is being supported by the district team. So we're really pleased with that. We've had a couple of conversations with the team, and we think we're on the same page and heading in a good direction. Those are the highlights. There are a lot of bills, and I know city staff is reviewing many of them, and the triage committee of the city council is reviewing them. There's just a lot to go through, so we'll be continuing to vet those bills and responding to vet those bills in terms of with the perspective of the city's priorities, and then also responding to various requests that the city gets to weigh in on other bills as well.
Great, thank you so much, Ann, and in reviewing the bill chart. Wow, there's a lot. I was reviewing it last night, and I was like, oh, this is a lot. So
It's gonna get bigger.
I know. I can't imagine. So one of the things that even as I was going through the bills, I noticed that they were similar in there were like buckets that were kind of similar, but had like a slight twist on them. And there were just a lot of bills that kind of fit into that category. Like they were all trying to take slightly different approaches to addressing a similar issue. Are you having or hearing any words about maybe after this first pass or this first tranche of so many different bills that folks may be working towards reaching some agreements to kind of consolidate? Are you hearing anything about some of that happening and that might help us with prioritizing?
Sure. The committees try to kind of bunch as much as they can, given they can't wait for all the bills and then schedule hearings. They do try to schedule similar topics together when they can. And of course, both advocates and legislators try to figure out, is there a way to combine, get rid of the things that really aren't going to go, and of the things that seem worthy, can they be combined to be just more efficient that way. But that generally doesn't happen until after hearings. The bills that get introduced by the filing deadlines each get their own hearing. Now, there are some committees that are really significantly limiting the testimony allowed on bills that they've seen before. So they are trying to shorten things that way, but that doesn't have a direct impact on the number of bills that we need to vet. So we still have to do that front end work, even if things are consolidated later.
Right, thank you. Councilmember Small?
Thank you, Mayor. And I did want to say a couple of things. One, I just got an email from the esteemed sponsor of the bill that is for
I'm sorry.
No, that was
I'm
me. That
picking
wasn't
up
actually you.
about
I have a really intriguing theory about contract theory and real estate law, and in particular as it applies to renters. And so I actually told Janelle that we would be doing a flyer on this particular issue. And I got an email from them that said that they were interested in that happening. So I'm probably going to be wandering around on that day as well. So you're going to have to probably take care of me, particularly if I have another brain fart like the one I just did. And then secondarily, I guess I wanted to edify the thing that the mayor just said about the whole Scrooge McDuck angle to this whole thing of working smarter and not harder on the sheer volume of bills. Would you say that there are areas in which these policy chunks are more likely to move with regard to committees and assignments? Because one of the things about trying to peel an onion is that if you put it in different places, it may look like a different lens, but it's still the same onion. So I'm curious about whether or not you, particularly with regard to any of the housing bills and or the funding mechanisms for education and other things as we're moving forward. It's also, nerdy and political sciencey of me, but like if we're not going to have any money, then everybody's going to try to pass a bill, and that seems like what's happening. So I'm just curious if which ones are going to go.
So it's always tricky to try to predict because I can never make a guarantee on anything, with one or two tiny exceptions. I had mentioned this, I think, last week. Housing is a really big topic this session. There are certainly themes that are of great interest among legislators and the public, from other stakeholder groups, from the governor. So I can absolutely say with surety something related to housing is going to happen. The governor's bill has a very good chance. I think the Just Cause legislation this session has a very good chance. So, I short of saying, what specifics we'll get through, there are chunks like that, in the environment space. There's going to definitely be some more action on climate solutions. So, juvenile justice is a very big issue. Something's going to happen there. Don't know what. It might be an amalgamation of some of the bills that have been introduced. So, so I think that there are some of those kinds of topics that I think are going to get just a lot of attention. And I think there's enough public attention, enough public pressure, public interest to move some of those things. I don't know if that exactly answers your question.
No,
but
it does. And it did prompt me to the other thing that I did want to make sure that got funneled up to you or through Robert. And that's related to the juvenile justice issues. Specifically during the Ward 6 meeting, one of the things that that the chief and members of the leadership team were very clear about was the nature of detaining and arresting and the opportunities of, let's say, senior criminals to take advantage of junior criminals and their inability to be arrested or detained. And so I know that between that and what the esteemed senator from District 20 said about his desire to amend the legislation, do you have any indication as to whether or not there is a direction with regard to that? And or if not, I would probably tell you to touch base with Chief, because it's one of the profound wonders of this place that we do have kind of a thoughtful and considerate police department on some of these issues, and so there may be some cachet to having him work the issue.
So it's just a very contentious issue right now. You are correct about Senator Smith wanting to, I think the words that he's using is tweak the reform law that they passed just a couple of years ago. We know there's, the governor is responding, I think, to a lot of concerns that are being raised, as are the legislators. There's also, though, a big push from a lot of the youth justice reform advocates to say, let's not pull back on those reforms yet. let's invest in the services that should be wrapping around and supporting some of these kids and their families. So, I absolutely will predict something's going to pass, but how far it goes in terms of, I think they're going to try to find a balance. I think they probably will pull back on one or two things that they did a few years ago, but hopefully there's also going to be some changes that and investments that are really aimed at providing the services that kids really need in order to help. There are a lot of programs out there that have very high success rates in providing intervention for kids who are involved in the juvenile justice system. So
I guess what
I
I'd
think
say about
they're going to
that,
try to find that balance.
I'd say about that too, Ann, is that the chief did actually go off on a quite effective soliloquy about the inability of society to recalibrate and spend the kinds of money on the wraparounds that you need to address some of these issues if you're going to make these kinds of policy changes. So, so if something is going to move and it's going to be a considered thing, then having a considered policy opinion on it, I think, would be of value to everybody.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Small. Seeing no more lights, thank you so much, Ann, for all that you do in Annapolis, and we will be in touch this week to get ready for a Just Cause testimony next week. All right.
Great. Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a good evening. All right, so we are going to move into our next agenda item, which is public comments, because we don't have any voting items this evening. If you have any general public comments, please come down.
Okay. Give me a sec. You don't have to have a mask. I'll take mine off. Here. No, it's okay. Okay, thank you. So, you okay? So my name is Lucy Moore, and I'm here with my son Siggy. We're both Ward 3 residents. And I last came before you all to talk about the city budget and to ask you for continued funding for grants and direct cash assistance programs. And I'd still love for you guys to do that, so I'm watching. But I'm here tonight to ask you all to consider passing a ceasefire resolution for the war in Gaza. And I realize there's a way that that's sort of taking us from the nitty-gritty local to very far away, but I actually think the two are quite interrelated. As I'm sure you all know from following the media, from last week hearing from Jumana Musa, the situation in Gaza is devastating. And our country is a part of it. Our country has been backing Israel, who has managed to kill 27,000 Palestinians in the last few months, of which 11,000 of those are children. And as a mom and a caretaker, you know, it's hard to sit with. It's hard to think about, you know, how would I feel if it was my family starving, if it was my home bombed, hold on a sec, and my community that, you know, was destroyed beyond recognition. And when I think about that and think about, you know, our city, you know, could we pass a resolution? Like, would I even care if a city 6,000 miles away was considering that? Like, I probably wouldn't. I don't know. And I'm fortunate that I don't have to know. But I do know that as a Tacoma Park resident, I think it's incredibly important for us to think about passing this resolution. And I think so because it's a chance for us as a city to tell our residents and our neighbors and our elected officials at every level of government that we believe that all life is precious, that we believe that anti-Muslim and anti-Palestinian sentiment has no place in this community. Hold on a sec. Yeah, we're over there. And that we believe that how we spend our money is a reflection of who we are as a community. Yeah. And unfortunately, how we spend our money, you know, we don't always have the most control over. Right now, our country is sending $3.8 billion to Israel for its military every year. Congress is looking at increasing that to $14 billion, or that's $14 billion in addition. If they do that, that means Tacoma Park residents are contributing about $1.2 million through our federal tax money to the war. And, you know, it's that 1.2 is not a lot in the context of a giant military budget, but for our community, that amount is significant. And that amount is actually roughly the amount that we would need to continue to fund our grants and direct cash assistance programs. So that would mean for us funding housing, emergency relief, rental assistance, our grants programs, our food insecurity programs. Those are all programs that had federal dollars, don't anymore. but could again. And I don't think you guys can just magically move these pots of money around. But I do think you all are folks who have a voice and a platform, and I'd like to ask you to use that platform to call for ceasefire, to call for change, and to call for an investment in what we in Tacoma Park believe in: housing, recreation, education, not bombs. Thank you all.
Thank you. Can I say hi to one of my favorite people?
Do you want to say hi, Ziggy?
Hi, Ziggy.
Do you want to say hi? Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Have a good
Thank
one.
you.
All right. Do you have any other public comments?
Yes, hi, my name is Muhammad Al Sharif. I want to second the first comment, and I want you to call for a ceasefire as well. I'm a Palestinian American. In 2016, my family and we came straight from Gaza to Tacoma Park. And it was the best thing happened to me and to my daughters and to my wife. From the first day until now, Tacoma Park has been nothing but generous, protective, welcoming city to me, to my daughters, and to my wife. Our neighbors, when we met the first day in 2016, Elena, I saw a bumper sticker on her car, and she said, "We protect Palestinian human rights." I literally cried. I've never seen a bumper sticker, and I lived in the United States all over, and I've never seen this. And I came here and I said, look, this is the place. We took a walk to Old Tacoma, and we saw a restaurant. It says the Mediterranean restaurant. We looked at the window, and I saw a Palestinian embroidered tray, and it was from Gaza, and it was sitting there. I said, God, this is crazy. These are signs coming to me in the first week or so. Then we walked around again, and we saw another on Carroll Street, another house raising a Palestinian flag. This is what Tacoma Park is in 2016, and in the first 2 months that I lived here. I'm not going to talk about what is happening right now in Gaza. You all know the news, and you all know the tragedies and the atrocities. But I want to tell you from a Palestinian American perspective who you are. You are a great city. You are a city does not compare anywhere in the United States. And I lived around. I lived in California. Nothing compares to Tacoma Park. So I do ask you to call for a ceasefire, not because any political motives. It's just because it's right and it's a human to call for a ceasefire.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do you have any other general public comments this evening? And Tababu, I believe you've requested 5 minutes, correct?
Well, 5 minutes, 2 minutes for the video. Apparently, it's not going to be shown, but I will make sure the link is sent to you.
Perfect.
All right.
So would you still like for us to make sure we give you the 5?
Okay.
I know you, Tababu. We'll give you the 5.
Yes, thank you.
Let's make sure that we have 5 minutes for Mr. Safa.
All right, thank you. First, let me say hi. Good to be here. Good to be back. I came back on Saturday. The city of Tacoma Park made me proud. That resolution you passed was admired and appreciated by everybody I talked to. from my stakeholders, my partners, the farmers, and high-level officials from the African Union. I'm here to report on the progress, exciting progress of my trip. But first, let me say, my heart bleeds for the people of Palestine. Every night, I sleep with pain. I just want to say that. And thank you for your bravery, for the people who spoke before me. That said, the 6 weeks in Ethiopia, I was fully engaged. And I have two exciting development reports. First and foremost, the African Union has highly appreciated, in fact, a commissioner for trade and commerce at the African Union, who knows the project very well, who had invited me in 2019 to speak on the benefit cooperation model at the African Continental Free Trade Agreement signature in Niamey, Niger, and again in November in Addis, where I spoke in the assembly of all the Chamber of Commerces of the African Chamber of Commerce at the African Union headquarters. But this time it was different. He could see it coming to life. And it coincided with African Union's ambition to galvanize support for the passing of AGOA, the Africa Growth Opportunity Act, to which Benefit Cooperation for Africa is proposed as an amendment. So they were happy to learn the development, and they want me to coordinate my effort with theirs. Apparently, in May, they're going to hold the Africa Growth Opportunity Act midterm review, and they want me to calibrate what I'm doing with them so they can be with me at the second Benefit Cooperation Forum, as well as the planned congressional briefing. That is a very exciting news for me. Literally, because living in Takoma Park, I dared to dream. And as an activist, I wanted to impact the U.S.-Africa trade, the cornerstone of U.S.-Africa policy. Now I have African Union behind me. I'm very, very proud, and thank you for all those support. Not only you, the people of Takoma Park has given me to make this thing, to make this thing come a reality. The second one is, luck has it, USAID is releasing a fund for innovative ideas like mine, a 3-stage funding. The first one, $200,000 for a pilot, and $1.5 million to scale, and then another $15 million to finally blow any initiative that can address. It's all written on the letter that I submitted. So I'm excited, I'm thrilled, and I hereby ask you to be patient with me and kindly reschedule the second Benefit Cooperation for Africa in line with the African Union initiative. I'll come and report, but the video piece I want you to see was a video clip. Senator Ben Cardin spoke of my initiative at the 6th annual private sector conference at the USAID, saying this is a model that can be innovative to serve the mission of the USAID. So it lines up perfectly, and be patient with me. Something great is going to happen, and thank you, and I'll keep you updated. And thank you for making me a proud, not only citizen of Takoma Park, a proud African, a proud Takoma Parkian, and a proud activist in the world who can change, simply change one little policy that can impact the lives of millions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tababu. Do we have any other general public comments tonight? Come on down.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Shayna Gold. I'm a Ward 3 resident. I'm also a Jewish woman, a mom, a nurse, and a member of a group called Tacoma Families for Ceasefire. I'm here because I think, like all of us, I have an obligation to use any platform that my privilege affords me to call for an immediate ceasefire. I'm here to adamantly reject the notion that calling for a ceasefire is anti-Semitic, and I'm here to urge you, as my elected representatives, to amplify the values and the will of our community by adopting a ceasefire resolution immediately. I'd like to share from the wisdom of various peace activists, including rabbis and others from the Jewish community, whom I respect a great deal. A permanent ceasefire is the only way towards peace for all people. Jewish safety in the diaspora here in Tacoma Park in the United States and in Israel is inextricably linked to Palestinian liberation. Calling for a ceasefire is not anti-Semitic, and criticism of the Israeli regime is not inherently anti-Semitic. In fact, these conflations undermine any meaningful interrogation of true anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and other forms of bigotry and racism. And it is possible, and I think necessary, for us to simultaneously grieve the unspeakable suffering of my ancestors, of those who were attacked on October 7th, and also grieve and honor the reality of what's happening in Palestine, decades of occupation, siege, and displacement, and relentless and ongoing revenge attacks that are taking place today. And finally, I think free speech is not free until it protects Palestinian voices and advocates. And I feel that this is a local issue in the sense that members of our community are being censored for naming what's happening, and more who aren't speaking up are afraid to speak up at all for fear of reprisal. And I think this is a really troubling and dangerous dynamic that we have an obligation to disrupt. So as our elected representatives, we're looking to you for bravery, and we're looking to you for leadership on this. I, for one, want our kids to grow up in a community in which calling for an end to relentless violence against innocent civilians is not controversial or too complicated, where they know that speaking up for justice is always more important than any fear, hesitation, or discomfort that comes with it. And lastly, I intend no harm with my words tonight. It feels daunting to find the right words right now to speak up on this, but silence is not an option. And please make no mistake that silence does send a very clear and a very harmful message about who counts in our community. So I respectfully urge you to break the silence and waste no time in adopting a ceasefire resolution on behalf of Tacoma Park. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any other general public comments this evening?
Good evening. My name is Liana Smith. I've lived in Tacoma Park on and off since 1971. I can remember standing with Sam Abbott, whose name is on the building, outside the South African Embassy when we were protesting against apartheid. Subsequently, the Tacoma Park City Council voted on a resolution condemning apartheid in South Africa. In 2003, when the US invaded Iraq, we also sat in these chambers right before Valentine's Day with peace signs in the shape of hearts, and again, the City Council voted on a resolution condemning the US invasion of Iraq. I've taught in Tacoma Park for over 24 years at the elementary school, so I'm very committed and very tied to this city, and I feel compelled to call on the City Council to pass a ceasefire resolution. We are experiencing every single day on the television, on our phones, everybody can see a genocide taking place in real time. My daughter is Palestinian. She's currently working in Palestine in education. I lived there and worked there for 3 years, many, many years ago, and this would have been in the late 80s, and I saw the unbelievable hardships that Palestinians were going through under occupation. However, it pales in comparison to the slaughter that is taking place, aided and abetted by the United States through diplomacy, through military, through funding. And it is imperative that messages be sent on the local level to our state representatives, to the White House, that this is not something we can possibly accept. So I urge you strongly to consider that never again includes Palestinians. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any additional general comments this evening?
Hello, my name is Kausar Talat. I live in Ward 3. I'm an Egyptian American. I'm a physician and a public health practitioner. Imagine a conflict in a land a third of the size of Montgomery County, surrounded by fences on 3 sides, and water that's guarded by armed ships on the 4th. Imagine a land a third of the size of Montgomery County that has 2 times the number of people, 70% of them women and children, being bombed on a daily basis. More than 90% of the population's been displaced. They are staying in schools, in government facilities, in families, in family members' houses. There's 1 toilet for every 500 people. There's 1 shower for every 3,000 people, but there's no water for the showers because they only get enough potable water to fulfill a quarter of their daily needs, so they're drinking non-potable water. That means they're drinking water that isn't safe. Diarrhea has increased between 33 times to 99 times the pre-war rates. We have an obligation to say something. We have an obligation to say, not in our names, that you are doing this violence to people. Most of the people who are the number of injured is only about 60,000. You've heard that 27,000 people have died. That's a really unusual ratio of wounded to dead. Usually you have a lot more wounded people than you have dead people. It's because the kind of injuries that are happening there are so severe, and because most of the hospitals are no longer functioning, and even only half of them are partially functioning. So the injuries that do happen, if they hit the trunk or the head, they're dead. Only if they hit the extremities are the injuries survivable, because they can do amputations, but they don't have anesthesia for the amputations. So, you know, I can't be as eloquent as Mohammed, and he and his family are incredibly lucky to be here in Tacoma Park and not to be back in Gaza, but their families are there. And because of that, we really need to call for a ceasefire. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other general public comments this evening?
Thank you. My name is Kirsten Stade, and I live in Ritchie Avenue in Ward 4. Hi, Terry. And just to follow on the themes that we've been hearing, if today was like other days over the past 4 months, more than 200 Palestinians were killed in Gaza just today, and more than 70 were children. If today is like other days, then right at this moment or within the next 3 hours, a child is having their leg amputated in Gaza, likely without anesthesia. In fact, more than 10 children are losing a leg every day in Gaza. Israel's bombing campaign, as you know, has killed nearly 30,000 Palestinians, which is an underestimate, and has obliterated hospitals and healthcare infrastructure, including killing more than 300 doctors. Those who remain and are not killed by the bombing or by sepsis face starvation and exposure. 90% of the population goes a whole day without food on a regular basis, and 1.2 million people lack shelter, and nighttime temperatures are now in the 40s. The October 7th Hamas attack on Israeli civilians was an atrocity, but it does not justify the collective punishment of the Palestinian people, which, as we know, is a violation of international law. The International Court of Justice in The Hague has ruled overwhelmingly in favor of South Africa in its genocide case against Israel. This genocide does not make Israeli Jews more safe. In fact, this egregious ongoing violation of international law is profoundly destabilizing to the region and to the safety of every one of us. Today, 132 Israeli hostages remain in Gaza, and dozens have already been killed by Israel's bombardment. It's clear that the continued bombing constitutes the greatest threat to these remaining hostages, as well as to Palestinian children, women, and men who have no place to flee, as their homes, hospitals, schools, and even refugee camps are intentionally obliterated by Israeli bombing. International experts, US government officials, and even officials within the Israeli government have admitted that there is no military pathway to eliminating Hamas or to obtaining peace and safety for the citizens of Israel and occupied Palestine. The only pathway begins with an immediate ceasefire. Tacoma Park may not have a direct line to Congress and the president to influence them to discontinue aid to Israel contingent on a ceasefire. But we can be a part of the rising tide of public sentiment across the world that is calling for an immediate and permanent ceasefire throughout all of historic Palestine, which includes Gaza, the West Bank, and Israel. an end to U.S. aid and arms to Israel, an end to the siege so that humanitarian aid can enter Gaza, the release of all hostages held in both Israel and Gaza, and an end to the ongoing genocide of the Palestinian people. We do, as you may know, have language about a ceasefire resolution for Tacoma Park, and we hope to speak to all of you soon about next steps. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any additional general public comments this evening?
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Michelle Bollinger, and I am an almost 20-year resident of Tacoma Park. I live in Ward 3. I'm a member of the community, and my children have gone to school in this community. And I just wanted to add my name to the list of people who are coming before you tonight to ask that you consider, discuss, and pass a resolution that calls for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. I can't really represent in words what the past 4 months has been like for people in Palestine, for Palestinians in our community, but I can, as a human being, say that we've all witnessed unbearable trauma, destruction, and death. And that does something to people when they witness it and don't say anything about it. And I should have been here earlier, and I wasn't, but I'm here now. And I'm sitting here listening to what people are saying, and remembering the things that stand out. I mean, obviously, the war on civilians, the thousands of children. The moment I'll never forget was when the last university was bombed, and someone said, this is what genocide is. It's destroying a people's future, which is obviously, as an educator, something that hit me very hard. I work with teenagers. It's very confusing when something very plain is happening in the world and the adults in their lives can't name it, won't talk about it, won't elucidate for them what's really happening through their actions. And not only that, we live in a society where our government, our national government, the people right down the street, are failing this moment, morally, politically, and every other way. So the Tacoma Park that we have been won't be that Tacoma Park anymore if we look this historical moment in the eye and turn away. And I'm here to say I'm not looking away, and there are a lot more of us, I think, in our community who are going to say to you, we're not looking away, and we're not going to let you do it either. I say that respectfully and with humility, but seriously and with urgency. We've waited too long, and I encourage you and I ask you to listen to what people have said tonight and take action on a resolution as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other general public comments?
Hi, my name is Mark Shmueli, and I've been an immigration attorney in, I call it the Willow Street building, since 2005. So, and I'm also my entire family is Israeli. My grandparents got married there in 1923. My dad was raised there. They were all refugees. And this is hard. This is hard getting it from all sides. As somebody who has got, once there was a realization of what really is the Israeli government's policy, it's hard, because I'm also close to my family there. My cousin, from the week after October 7th, she was at funerals all week for people her friends' kids that were killed. It's awful. I also had a client from Gaza. I was doing with another attorney who's Muslim, and I said, as a joke, hey, tell her family's there. She was trying to get them out. They probably see somebody with my name tag on, morbid Jewish humor, right? So and it just so happened that her brother-in-law was identified. So it was a month earlier that he was missing, and he was just not identified, but declared dead because they couldn't find him. So all the numbers we see, they're double. And I do human rights law, immigration law, and I can everybody said enough tonight. There's enough media, and this is Tacoma Park where everybody has all their degrees and everything. I know it's not knowledge. I know it's fear. it's fear in this community because I know what the backlash is. And the things that the thing that is really hard is that I've kind of been alone. And I am so happy that a younger generation of Jewish kids and other kids are looking at it differently. And they're kind of mad at my generation. I was sort of alone on it. And I can say my son, he did go to Tacoma Middle. He's in Rockville High. And they came up to him and they asked him right after, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And he came, "Dad, I'm really mad." Why? Because they didn't go up to any other kids, any Muslim kids, any Ethiopian kids. And I know people in this community from other parts of the world who have family at home. I've got Ethiopian clients whose families in hiding, and other Cameroonian clients and all that. Lots of people, nothing. And it is the fear, the power. I know it is in this county because they're my people and they do it to me. And it's okay, I love them. I just don't talk to them about it. It's not, but you guys, somebody talked about bravery and courage. You have nothing to lose, really, nothing to lose. And everything to gain by standing up, because it's got to start at the grassroots and you're it. So please, please, it should be a no-brainer. Please support us and don't leave us alone.
Thank you. Do you have any additional general public comments this evening?
Hi, my name is Aisha. I wasn't actually planning to speak, so I didn't plan this, but I think it's just growing up, I'm a teenager. I'm 17 years old. I can't yet vote, but I will be able to vote in the next election. And being surrounded by politicians that I'm Egyptian Muslim, and growing up in a nation that cares very little about my people and about the people from the Middle East as a whole, I think even in this tragedy that we see now, there's so much silence because people are so scared to speak out. And it's disheartening if even the most local levels of government aren't able to stand up and fight for justice, even if that justice is so far away. Even if it's symbolic, it means a lot, especially to young people. Even it gives us hope for the future. I have currently very little hope in the government, as it has been consistently failing my people. And so I ask that you please pass a ceasefire, or call for a ceasefire. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And remember, you can vote in the city of Tacoma Park. Yes, I did. Awesome. Do you have any other general public comments?
Hi, my name is Badji Albenna. I live in Ward 3. I am about 20 years Tacoma Park resident. I'm a Palestinian Iraqi American who has been in the States since 7 years old. I have very little to add to what has already been said. I agree with so much. So many of you have touched my heart this evening. I want to ask that Tacoma Park remembers who Tacoma Park is, who Tacoma Park speaks to be, and that we need to meet those tough moments as many of us have called for this evening. There is an opportunity to look this moment in the eye and say, we do not believe that this is the way the world should function. We in Tacoma Park stand for the idea that every human life matters, and that each person in this community and each person tied anywhere in the world is entitled for rights and equality and safety and humanity and water and food and medicine and the right to be alive without fear. That's what we're asking for. We are, as Americans, participating, whether we acknowledge it or not. We are very active, and each of us needs to help push to say we don't accept a world like this, we don't want a world like this, and we don't think this is the world that we want to offer the next generation, the current generation, and ourselves. So I want to thank you all for listening. I really hope you take this seriously. It matters. We're members of your community, and it means the world to us that we all stand together and say, this is not acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any additional public comments this evening? General public comments. Oh.
Arthur David Olson, Ward 4, Herbie Hancock Avenue. Last week you heard the bad news about State Highway Administration, SHA, work on Carroll and Philadelphia. The good news is that SHA has done work on Carroll Avenue, a state road. This comes after years of the state disclaiming responsibility for state road sidewalks. The state would not even take responsibility for Americans with Disability Act, ADA, compliance. As a result, the city has been doing state road ADA work. The capital improvement plan in this year's budget calls for $150,000 to be spent in the current budget year and $500,000 for each of the next 4 budget years. Given the Carroll Avenue work, my hope is that the state will do ADA work on other state roads in the city. I hope the council will provide as much time as possible for that to happen by zeroing out ADA work on state roads in next year's budget. And I hope the upcoming budget will zero out funding of safe routes to schools sidewalk work. This spending seems to have been ineffective. The budget adopted for fiscal year 2014 had funding for 3.15 full-time equivalent crossing guards. This year's budget has funding for 3.68 full-time equivalents. If sidewalk spending had been effective, I'd expect that number to go down rather than up. As someone without a car or bike, I use sidewalks a lot. It's not that I'm against sidewalks, it's that I'm for necessary and effective spending. I hope the council is as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any additional general comments? Any additional general comments this evening? Going once. Going twice. I'm looking at someone in the back. Just give them a little more time. All right, next time. I'm going to get you up here. All right. All right, wonderful. So we're going to move on to council comments. Council Member Small.
Thank you, Mayor. I did want to say a couple of things. To begin with, I just wanted to thank all of the people who came out here to articulate a entirely reasonable position for some place like this to, move forward on. I would say that as far as being alone on things, I totally get that. And sometimes those things happen. So I appreciate you and the efforts that you made. There are people whose words touched my heart, and I know that my wife, who was here last week, who was out of town for work, may have watched this, I'm unsure, but if she did, she'll be heartened by the efforts of the members of the community around her. I did want to talk about words a little bit and sort of get my egghead on. It's Black History Month. I have on my ultimate hat. It's I got a Kansas City Monarchs hat on with the colors of the diaspora. I'm pretty happy. I just got today. It's Black History Month. And so I wanted to talk about words because I think over the past couple of weeks, we've seen pretty clearly that we're dealing with a couple of misunderstandings about things. And so one of them, so I'd like to talk about equality and equity. And it's important that we do this because, and I feel qualified to talk about it. Equality is a condition. So it's a psychological condition of comfort. Whereas equity is by necessity an indictment of previous conduct. There's no other way around it because it presupposes that some fairness has not occurred. So the problem with that is if you don't have a language whereby you can comfortably discuss these things, then it will hurt your feelings to have been the person or persons who have promulgated points of inequality because it's inequitable. So if you have a group of people who allege that they're going to turn the corner on any number of these things, and institutional neglect is the operative framework with regards to state actors or county actors or in discrete corners of things, there's a chance that accountability and any number of other personal emotions could affect you. But I would argue that if you're going to make that turn and turn that corner, you got to deal with those kinds of things. You got to find a language to discuss these things. You have to accept the fact that people move on. And I'd close by saying at somewhere near the appropriate time that it's not my fault that I learned these things or that I have a language for it, but it's Black History Month. I have Black Palestinian children, and B.B. King said that the only thing that people can't take away from you is your education. And my dad liked the blues. And so, there you have it.
Thank you, Councilmember Small. Councilmember Gibson.
I would like to also thank and support the many people that spoke tonight on the multiple issues, but in particular the call for a ceasefire. I do think, as my colleague said, it is reasonable to ask for that, and I am very interested in seeing what the actual language says, because I do think that, as Councilmember Small said, words matter, and we have to be very careful about words. So I'm anxious to talk with my colleagues about how what words are being proposed and whether they fit with what we are comfortable doing. But thanks all of you that spoke on that subject. I want to talk about a couple of other things. Ward 3 survey that I put out a little over a week ago on budget priorities and services. I have more than 100 respondents, and so to the rest of Ward 3, please fill out that survey until February 15th. I want to comment about the County Council Committee meeting on the minor master plan. Some good news there. The committee is going to recommend to remove rent stabilization language, which the planning board had recommended. They are also going to recommend, if I understood correctly, that MPDUs up to 15%. I'm trying to remember. Excuse me. What MPDUs are? I'm sorry.
Moderately priced dwelling units.
Dwelling units was set at 12.5, was to increase to 15, and surprisingly, 4 properties on Maple Avenue are being considered right now to be reduced from 150 feet to 120 feet. Some progress to make the size of the buildings that are allowable there fit the area of Maple Avenue. And lastly, I want to say that I had a nice little walk with our new city manager on Ward 3, and I'm sure he was overwhelmed with what he saw there, which is and appreciated the time and to spend with him and around Ward 3. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Gibson. Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. And I wanted to thank everyone who came tonight and spoke. I appreciate you standing up, not just for Tacoma Park, but for our characteristics, our values around the world. And for some of you may not know, before the meeting I talked with my friend Billy, he's a young man like me. We've been active here in the city for a few years, and tonight's meeting reminded me of when Mr. Sinbet came and spoke, calling on the city council to ask the U.S. Congress to demand human rights in Ethiopia. And I want to just give you some feeling of hope, and that the council did consider that and did support a resolution calling for human rights in Ethiopia back in the day, thanks to, in part, to Mr. Sinbet's work. And I look forward to council discussion of the requests that we heard tonight. Thank you, Billy. Tababu, congratulations on the progress that you made in your recent trip to Ethiopia, and this is bringing a nice segue back to local, because the project that you're talking about is local. It's a Tacoma Park grown and Tacoma Park initiative that we look forward to your success with that. Lastly, I just call attention to my T-shirt that is highlighting the step that was taken on Flower Avenue, just outside of Tacoma Park, with the Tacoma Theater being, the marquee being renovated, and the Flower Theater being lit up again, only from the street right now. Doors are still locked. There's no nobody watching movies there yet, but maybe one day. But mayor and several council members went up to see the lighting of the new marquee, and the great work that the Montgomery Housing Partnership, and I shouldn't have started that because I can't name all the organizations that were involved in that, but I thank those that did help to fund and get that work done, again, with the help of the state. And if the mayor talks about herself being there, I'll stand up and and show off my T-shirt. All right, thank you.
Councilmember Fulcher.
Thank you. I just want to thank everybody that came out to speak tonight. We all know that Tacoma Park's a very intelligent, very educated, very eloquent community, and it means a lot to me that that you felt that this was a safe space where you could come and share your vulnerability with us as well. So thank you very much for coming out tonight.
Councilmember Honzak.
Thank you. I also want to thank everyone who came out tonight. I'm really deeply moved. This is a really hard topic for me to talk about. And to be honest, I've lost lots of nights of sleep about it. We're talking about human life. Every day I read about children being killed. And just to reveal my own biases, I spent a summer when I was 17 with Palestinian refugee orphan children, living and working with them day in and day out. That's what I bring to the table. So Aisha, in particular, as a young person, I feel so moved by the fact that you said that you feel you're surrounded by politicians, that even at the most local level of government, even if it's symbolic, that your government is failing you. I need to sleep on that. Okay? And I'm not saying that everyone else didn't move me in ways, but I'll be honest with you, I thought I came to a place last week where I felt like I might be able to speak publicly about these issues as a council member. I have very strong personal convictions, but it's a very different role for me to be a city council member and saying these things. And I need to do more thinking. I invite any one of you to come and reach out to me and talk to me more. It is not fear that is stopping me from saying something up here or from leading the charge for a call for a ceasefire. It is my conviction that is our number one responsibility as municipal officials to keep the public safe, and that I haven't yet been totally convinced that the council making a statement on these issues is going to make our community safer. But there are a lot of things that have been said tonight, honestly, that make me think about other issues too. And I'm, please come to me. And I want to share an anecdote, just because I have one in my back pocket right now that took me by surprise. Maybe it shouldn't have. I had a resident of mine who I represent who saw the calls for ceasefire on some of our public monuments and came up to me and said, "How are you okay with that?" And I was startled. I was startled because to me that was a call for peace. And I will just tell you, I spent a lot of time over the last several weeks digging in and trying to understand some of the other residents who had the same feelings. People who said they didn't feel comfortable putting menorahs in their windows, and other people who feel very much the opposite. So I'm just sharing those with you and speaking from my heart. And I'm trying to say the things that make me feel comfortable. A lot of really smart people who have really amazing backgrounds have spoken up on these issues, and almost everyone has been slammed and brought down, and it hasn't brought many people peace of mind. So I really want to be careful about how we do this as a community, because the things that we do here at the local level should make us feel safer. That's so important. And so I ask all of you to think about that as well. Every single person who lives all around us needs to feel safer as a result of the things that we do up here. And that matters to me a little bit more, to be honest with you, than whether we make a political statement about our national and international policy in spite of my convictions. But I'm not saying anything. I'm inviting you. My door is open. Please come and talk to me. And I just want to acknowledge really quickly that I was at the Flower Avenue Theater relighting, and my goal over the last several weeks has been to do everything I can to bring our community closer together. I'm working really hard on that along Flower Avenue. I have a very diverse community that I represent, and it is so important to me that we learn to find ways to celebrate together, to commune and talk to one another. And again, I invite anybody across our community to help me with those efforts. I'm doing a lot of things towards that goal. Thank you for everybody.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak. Okay, all right. Well, I want to join my colleagues in appreciation of everyone that came out tonight. The issues are deep, but lives matter. Every life on this globe matters. And so how we as a community can express that, I think, is what we're talking about, right? So just for my colleagues to know, residents did share with me some draft language. I've shared that with members of council, so you all will have that. And I just sent it. It's in your inbox. So I think one of the things that I do welcome, and I welcome, from the perspective, and again, it's not to politically charge like federal what's happening, but I don't like us living in a city where we can't have open dialogue that is constructive with both sides in a way, to Councilmember Honzak's point, ensure that the messaging, that everyone feels safe, right? And I'm pretty sure, I appreciate everyone that's come out tonight. We may next week have folks to the contrary. I don't know. My inbox may be blowing up right now. But I do think it's important for us to be able to have these conversations, because at the root issue of all of this is people wanting their children and their families safe on both sides. And so just figuring out the right way that we as a community can send that message is going to be important. So I look forward. I appreciate the residents that have reached out so far, Sarah, and everyone that is the families that have come together and signed the petition and organized events. and sharing potential language that council could consider. I think that's just so very important. It enables us to be in a better place to have the dialogue that we're having now, but maybe in a work session and try to figure out a way to kind of move forward with some language. So again, I appreciate all of you for coming out tonight and sharing your stories, providing us with the draft language which has been shared. And I look forward to you all engaging with us as we continue to have these conversations as we work towards developing the right language for our city. I do want to echo Councilmember Siemens. I was at Flower Avenue too. It was great. Want to send a great appreciation to Amy and MHP and all of the organizers. It was just such a special evening. We had so many various elected officials from the county and the state delegates. So it was really a great time to not only hear all of the great stories of what the theater used to be. Some were very salacious in terms of the first movie that was ever shown there. You had to be there. Exactly. So I just want to encourage folks that as you are at the corner of Flower Avenue and Pine Branch, you kind of look up and you see the new lights. It is the effort of many that have worked to try to bring that theater back to life. So that was exciting. Also had a wonderful time reading Llama Llama Red Pajama during the the book fair that happened this weekend. A special shout out to the Tacoma Park Middle School Horticulture Club. They sold me some great plants. And one thing that I like to tell people all the time, I am not the best plant caretaker, but I will say of all of my plants that I've purchased from all kinds of places, many have not fared well, but the ones that have all been bought by from children in Tacoma Park. The Children's Business Fair, plants are still alive from last year. And I am convinced that the plants I bought from our horticulture club at the middle school will survive because they propagate those plants themselves. So just want to tell everyone, if you ever have a chance to buy a plant from Tacoma Park Youth, do it. They will live. And the only other thing that I just want to make sure that folks are aware of is I believe we have a play day that is on, I believe, Sunday, the 11th, the 14th annual Midwinter Play Day, February the 11th. So I want to encourage people to come out and to check that out. And so with that, I will turn things over to our city manager, Mr. DeSpirito.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council, and please don't feel too badly about yourself when it comes to plants. I think I once killed a cactus and you only had to water it like twice a year. So there's no way you were worse than that. Good evening. From the Housing and Community Development Department. On Friday, February 9th, the Tacoma Arts Series is hosting a gypsy jazz concert by Franglaise. This will occur in the Community Center Auditorium at 7:30. It's free of cost and the public is quite welcome to attend. On February 12th at the Montgomery County Council Office Building, 100 Maryland Avenue, 3rd floor hearing room, the Montgomery County Planning, Housing and Parks Committee is hosting a work session on the minor master plan. The time is to be announced. This will also be live streamed at the link posted in tomorrow's comments on our website. Updates, I'm sorry? Yes. Is it on February 12th? I'm sorry?
The work session, which you said about...
Yeah, minor master plan.
Yes, please.
Yes. The purpose of the meeting is that the Montgomery County Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee is hosting a work session on the minor master plan. The time is to be announced. This will be at the Montgomery County Council Office Building, 100 Maryland Avenue in Rockville, third floor hearing room. This will also be live streamed and a link will be provided on the website tomorrow.
I think we may just want to triple check,
Okay.
because I believe
Did
that
that
that was
change?
supposed to be rescheduled.
Okay. This was the
March
information
4th.
I got,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
March 4th is when that meeting, I believe, has been rescheduled too.
Correct, unless it's a different meeting,
Yeah, a new one.
unless they're doing something different, but.
I'll check with staff on that, and
The
we'll-
committee is not going to meet again, but they may have a separate meeting that they've requested of Parks that maybe we're not aware of. So it would be helpful to just get a little clarification.
Absolutely. Thank you for pointing that out. Now,
No worries.
I'll get with staff and see if we can, we will clarify it for the mayor and council. Updates on the Tacoma Park Minor Master Plan process can be found on the city website. Currently, the Montgomery County Council Committee on Planning, Housing, and Parks is holding work sessions. The second work session was held on February 5th, and the committee made the following decisions. 1, to remove the language asking the city to consider changes to the rent stabilization policy. 2, to raise the moderately priced dwelling unit, or MPDU, requirement to 15% from the previous 12.5%. 3, to amend the language about no net loss of existing affordable housing to be district-wide. And 4, planning staff will review the height limits for the municipal district for parcels 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 19 for further discussion at the next work session. Okay. Housing, Community Development, and Public Works staff will continue to welcome feedback from the City Council on the proposed administrative regulations to the traffic calming and sidewalk requests presented to Council on Wednesday, January 17th. Pending Council feedback, staff hopes to release draft regulations for public comment in March. From the Police Department, thank you to our donors for the Montgomery County Animal Shelter and Humane Society Pet Supply Drive. Because of your generosity, we delivered multiple boxes of donations. If you missed dropping off your donation at the police station, you can still make them directly to the animal shelter at 7315 Muncaster Mill Road, Durwood, Maryland, or at the Humane Society, 601 South Stone Street Avenue in Rockville. From the City Manager's Office, on February 19th, the District 20 team is hosting a district night out in Annapolis for constituents. The evening will begin with light refreshments at Red Wine from 6 to 7:30 p.m., followed by an opportunity to see the floor session at 8 p.m. The City of Tacoma Park is providing the recreation bus free of charge for those interested who would like assistance getting there. Space is limited, so please register for the event. A link to do so will be posted in tomorrow's City Manager's comments on the city website and provides the option to sign up for the bus as well. Please note that the bus will load at the Community Center at 7500 Maple Avenue at 4:30 p.m. and leave by 5 p.m. We will post the time we plan to return after confirming with Annapolis. The Maryland Department of Transportation, MDOT, is reviewing the impact of recent changes made to the intersection of Carroll Avenue and Philadelphia Avenue as a result of their Carroll Avenue street restoration project. The city's construction manager has been in contact with MDOT as they develop their plans. The current plan, proposed, will adjust the travel lanes on Carroll Avenue to accommodate a wider lane for bus turns from Carroll Avenue to Philadelphia Avenue, and the reduction of the 2 lanes on Carroll at the firehouse to 1 lane for a short distance, before resuming to existing 2 lanes traveling northwest. As staff receives any further updates, we will certainly share them with the Mayor and Council. Employee highlights. Housing and Community Development would like to congratulate Housing Specialist Jean Kerr on the completion of the 2024 rental licensing process. She is a 33-year employee of the city, and Jean brings a wealth of experience to the city's annual rental license renewal process. working closely with property owners as they submit their required biannual renewal information. The entire team thanks Jean for the skills, oversight, and customer service that she brings to the process. And finally, I just want to express appreciation to those residents and community organizations who have reached out to me in my first few weeks here. And I look forward to scheduling time to meet with you and listen to your ideas, your feedback, and your concerns. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, I'm going to do a quick check with council to see if we need to do a quick 10-minute break before we move into our work sessions. Okay, we will reconvene at 9:05. Thank you so much. All right. I'm going to call the meeting of the City of Tacoma Park City Council back to order. All right, and we're going to move into our work sessions for this evening. All right, so the first work session we have is the Sustainable Maryland Committee recommendations. Just as a reminder for my colleagues, we will have a 20-minute presentation followed by a 15-minute Q&A. And with that, I'll turn things over to our city manager, Mr. Despirito, to kick us off.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council, guests. Yeah, we're pleased to have this opportunity to introduce a public discussion and update from Sustainable Maryland Committee and action recommendations. I think at this point my staff, Daryl and Dory, and if there's any further introduction that you wish to do to this item, or otherwise we'll. Very good. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kiara Atoyebi, and I am the former sustainability chair for the past 2 years. And I just wanted to give a brief introduction of why we were formed. So the Sustainable Maryland was established in 2011. It's a free and voluntary program for municipalities that want to go green and save green. The program helps municipalities to choose a direction for their sustainability efforts, improve access to resources, measure their progress, and share success with other municipalities. And Tacoma Park has participated since 2014 and received a bronze certification. 89 communities are registered, and I believe we received a bronze, and they have the new silver tier. And this year we are, the committee is going to help the sustainability manager with the application process, with the upcoming deadline being June 30th of 2024. And we have already completed 2 of the mandatory actions, which is to create a green team and create an action plan. So now, at this time, I am going to turn it over to my colleagues on the committee. Emmanuel.
Thank you, Kiara, and let me just adjust that for a second. So, dear council members, dear mayor, dear city manager, welcome to the role. So I'm Emmanuel Wagner. I am the new chair of the Sustainable Maryland Committee of Tacoma Park. And I will present on how the city can improve and expand its electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So full disclosure, my family actually owns a battery electric vehicle, but we also own a hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicle. So the first thing I'm actually going to, which actually the vehicle is outside, so if you want to take a drive later on. All right, I'll take you up on that. I'm first going to actually go through a couple of definitions because only 4% of our city residents own electric vehicles. I don't know how well versed you are in the terminology, and it's kind of important for to be on the same page. So let me level set with you first and just explain really briefly what we're talking about. So for electric vehicles, they're often called EVs. They're also called zero-emission vehicles. Same thing. There's 3 categories: plug-in hybrid vehicles. Those are your regular gasoline vehicles that have a battery that you can plug into the electrical grid and charge. And the idea is to basically just have better efficiency of your vehicle. Then you have your standard battery electric vehicles. Those run entirely on electricity and can be recharged from the electric grid. And that's your commonly known electric vehicle car makers. And there's quite a diversity of vehicles available now. And then the last one in that bucket is hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles. Those run on electricity, but they actually produce the electricity on board, not from a battery, through hydrogen in a fuel cell. I'm not going to talk much about that because we don't have the infrastructure here in place yet. But the infrastructure for charging goes into 3 buckets as well. The level 1 one is really like a household outlet that you just have at home. You plug it in. It's very slow charging. The ones I want to talk about to you and that Tacoma Park has a little bit of is level 2 and DC fast charge. And level 2 are like basically overnight charging experiences. It gives you a full tank about 8 to 10 hours. A DC fast charge gives you a full tank in about 30 to 60 minutes. So that's kind of the ranges that we're talking about. And they, of course, serve different functions. A lot of homeowners do level 2 chargers because they're content with overnights. But a lot of residents in the city do not have the ability to plug their car in at night because they don't have dedicated parking or they don't have, or off-street parking. And so that's part of the conversation that we want to have here. So the challenge, and I want to be really clear about what we were asking of you here. The reason really why we're presenting about this is that there is actually a growing need to expand our electric vehicle charging infrastructure. We've done a really, really good job about 5 years ago by starting out with a significant EV charging stations. RS Automotive, of course, the first gas station that was converted to an electric vehicle charging station. But we haven't really made any progress since. There are a few fast chargers outside of Ward 1, actually none. So kudos on Ward 1. But we don't really have any outside of out of that ward. And the lack of charger access is a problem really for renters and for homeowners without on-property parking, as I mentioned. The reason why this is timely is because there is a lot of federal funding available right now, and it's not going to be there forever. The city can really leverage that with minimal effort and minimal funding to really go a long way. In order to continue the growth path that we have on electric vehicles, and I'll show some charts on that, we'll need to increase our access to electric charging infrastructure in order for people to really feel comfortable to make the switch to that technology. And so the ask, in short, is that staff, supported by our committee, develop goals and policies for the deployment of charging infrastructure in the city, and with the city providing some funding support. I know funding is a tricky part, but there is some safety in there. If we're not successful with maybe some of our applications, we don't need to spend that money, right? So there's a caveat there. Before we are going to say, we're not here to say like, we all just drive electric vehicles and we solve the climate crisis. So our real context I want to give is that electric vehicles are great, but we do need to increase public transit. We need to expand sidewalk and bike lane construction so that there is less of a need for car trips. It's safer to walk and bike. We need to increase the ability to walk in our city, so that means increasing density in Tacoma Park to attract more businesses to come to the city, and so that we don't have to go out of the city to do our errands. So there's a concept of 15-minute city that kind of flies in there. And then lastly, simple things like just continuing to monitor and enforce traffic and endorse traffic calming and road diets that make it also safer for our residents to use our current road network. So the city actually has done a tremendous amount of work in this area. So in 2019, the Climate Action Plan identified 2 out of the 18 actions related to specifically electric vehicles, mandating that EV charger ready, that there are parking requirements for EV charging from multifamily homes and businesses and parking areas, and then also to expand our EV charging infrastructure generally. Now, important data point is that almost half of our emissions in the city are from transportation. So we can really make a dent in our GHG emission inventory there. And yeah, this is, it looks a little small, but it's there. The second part is that in the 2020 Climate Emergency Response Framework Resolution that some of you passed, there is a specific sections on transportation, and they actually call out the increase of zero-emission vehicles, facilitating that, allowing for curbside charging equipment, which the city has actually done. and allow multifamily residential buildings with parking lots over a certain size to create the infrastructure for charging, and lastly, adopting a policy of purchasing and leasing zero-emission vehicles. So there's a number of things that are already passed in that climate resolution that we can fall back onto, and the city has already done a good job of that. Now, your priorities also fall into the same category. So environmental sustainable communities, your third prior council priority, and work towards a net zero greenhouse gas emission goal by 2035 is right in there. So this falls all into these buckets of what the city has done over the last few years, which is great. Zero emission vehicles do not emit tailpipe emissions, so there's no greenhouse gas emissions. Those only come from the production of electricity, which we're working on to become greener and greener. And the other health benefit that's not a greenhouse gas emission issue is it actually does not have any tailpipe emissions, so you don't have any other emissions that you breathe in, like particulate matter or what's commonly called NOx and SOx, which are just stuff that you don't really want children or people that are not perfectly healthy to inhale a lot. So that benefits that as well. We do have the data that, for example, 300 electric vehicles that displace 300 fossil fuel vehicles save about 1,400 metric tons of CO2 equivalent. So that's about 1% of our transportation-related emissions, which sounds fairly small, but it actually adds up, and so we want to continue to grow that number. So where are we right now? So this is the current status of our EV charging infrastructure, taken from our own city website. And in orange, you can see here our EV fast chargers, DC fast chargers. And those are, actually right behind here, one of them. And then you have one at the RS Automotive at the Junction and one in Old Town, Old Business District. And that's a total of 6 units, again, in orange. They're, again, all in Ward 1, and they're all serviced by one company. Unfortunately, and as an EV driver, I know this very well, 2 out of those 6 do not actually work and have not been working for quite a long time. Then we have additional, like, overnight or sometimes also called opportunity charging sites, which are these level 2 chargers. There are a total of 5 sites with 9 chargers in the entire city. Again, most of those are in Ward 1. 2 are in Ward 3 and 2 are in Ward 6. Lastly, we actually have this innovative program that I think Montgomery County then copied from us, which is curbside charging permits. So that allows for a residential homeowner that doesn't have a driveway or a garage on their property to install a electric vehicle charger in the public right of way. You don't get the parking lot reserved, but you be nice to your neighbors, and they probably gonna let you park there. And I actually benefited from one of those permits. Just to give you a highlight on where we are in terms of actual numbers. So the data goes back from Open Data Maryland back to 2020. We were about 200 vehicles. We have basically tripled that in 3 years, that number. And on the right, you can see that our charger installations have basically not increased at all during the same amount of time. So we have now 3 times as many vehicles that use the city's facilities charging infrastructure compared to 2020 when we installed those chargers. So now, if we all assume we agree that we should do something and grow this network, where would we put those? Well, it's really great because MCOG or MWCOG just released a model that highlights where those charges should go based on several different categories. The ones I'm going to highlight is actually multifamily housing and the focus on equity. The DC fast charging with a multifamily home focus, you can see pretty clearly has so the areas you would probably expect, which is along Flower Avenue, along University Boulevard, and pretty much all along New Hampshire. And that's where a lot of our multifamily homes actually reside. And then the equity focus is not very different. It's a little less on the New Hampshire and University Boulevard, but it's very strong on Flower Avenue as well. So it gives us a very good sense that those are the areas that we should focus our efforts. And so kudos to all the good work that MCOG did on that. So based on all of that, what we're really proposing is set aside funding in the budget for next year. And the reason why it's important to set aside funding is because it allows us to leverage those federal dollars better. The reason is, a lot of cities are in the same boat as we. They want to grow this infrastructure. If we provide these charging infrastructure installers with an incentive, like additional funding, that makes it easier for them to pick us because there's so much funding out there. They can kind of pick where they want to do the work. So it's a little bit of maybe a beauty contest, and setting aside some funding makes quite a difference. But it also shows that we're invested in this, and we want to grow this infrastructure here. The second ask is really to continue and build on the work that has already been done, but develop an education campaign on the grant programs and the rebate programs and all the funding that is available to residents to purchase electric vehicles, to install chargers for multifamily homeowners. There is a lot of programs out there, and it's because there's so many, it's a little hard to find your way about what you're eligible for. And then lastly, really to make this all a comprehensive effort is to create a roadmap and identify policies that would get us further, and maybe there are mandates that the city can continue to explore on adopting this technology and transition to more electric vehicles. So lastly, these are potential EV adoption strategies, and this is kind of like a potpourri of potential areas that we can explore further. But I wanted to give you the sense for what could be done here. The first one is just issue a request for interest to partner with charging operators. That gives us the ability to ask questions, what kind of technology is out there, how much does it actually cost, and that gives us a little bit more ability to apply, make good applications for these state and federal grants. Work with gas station owners, work with multifamily homeowners, and help to help identify the potential sites where that infrastructure can go, but also use these tools that are available to really identify where the money that would be spent on this infrastructure would go the farthest, because there's the lowest there's the most underserved wards. I mentioned the education outreach campaign, city adoption goals for electric vehicles, but then also advocate and support some bills that are currently, and we actually had a great update earlier with all the bills that are out there. There's actually a bill by Delegate Lewis, it's HB 64, that would expand the current rebate for electric vehicles, that is for new electric vehicles, to used electric vehicles. It's also a $3,000 rebate. It makes it cheaper for people that can't afford a new EV to maybe afford a used EV. And there is a secondary market, and used EVs are actually cheaper than gasoline vehicles, because for various reasons they lose a little bit more, depreciate faster. So, and then lastly, really continue to collaborate, not only partner, but collaborate with the regional and state entities on applications that, for example, for hydrogen fuel infrastructure, for medium and heavy duty trucks and light duty fueling, because all we talk about here is really light duty. But a lot of the emissions that are generated in the city and really in the state are from medium and heavy duty, and especially the most, the diesel stuff. That's the area that we don't really address with some of the charging that we've talked about right here. So I want to give enough time for questions later, so I'm going to stop here, but I do have some bonus slides where there are some more details on cost and so forth. But I'll hand it over to my co-chair, Janet. I'm assuming we're doing questions after both of the three. Perfect.
That's correct.
Get out of this. Yes, thanks.
Good evening, everyone. I am Janet Owens. I'm the Vice Chair and Secretary of the Sustainable Maryland Committee. I'm also a Ward 3 resident. And I would like to talk to you today about another greenhouse gas mitigation action, and that is food waste management. Tacoma Park's efforts to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions through organic waste composting is a key Sustainable Maryland action. And this was an action that actually Tacoma Park started way back in 2013, and so it was included in its last submission to Sustainable Maryland. And so I would like to talk to you about its current efforts on food waste management, and also some greater issues surrounding food waste, and finally propose a recommendation on where we can go. And as my colleague Emmanuel said, this is an action that has already been included in Tacoma Park's 2020 Climate Action Framework. So it's an action that most of you may be aware of, and certainly if you were a council member during the last submission. And regarding the program of Tacoma Park's food waste curbside collection, which started in 2013, it got great buy-in, and after the pilot stage, citizens joined the participation, but it stagnated over time. So eventually what I would like to propose is that staff and the committee work together to launch a multi-dimensional public campaign to promote source reduction, and also to review available resources of public works to determine how best to scale up organics collection, and finally to propose city code amendments that would require diversion of organics from trash, enabling enforcement. So why does food waste matter? It does so because it's a national issue. 40% of food produced is either lost or wasted at the national level, resulting in a loss of 1.3% of GDP. And food waste accounts for 24% of solid waste. Food waste in landfills accounts for the largest share of methane gas emissions. Food waste occurs throughout the agricultural production supply chain. Uneaten food consumes 22% of water, 16% of cropland used in production. But most importantly, households are mostly responsible for food waste. They generate an estimated 48% of US total food waste, and it's financially measurable at the household level. It's estimated that about a family of 4 will spend $1,800 on food that they never eat. They throw it away. So, considering all these resource impacts, preventing food waste by many is considered to be a global mitigation strategy, a top strategy, but it often receives limited attention in climate action plans. And the reason why it does so is because climate action plans value emissions on a sector-based approach. These protocols estimate food waste emissions of those only occurring in the waste sector. Both Maryland's and Tacoma Park's climate action plan rely upon sector-based accounting. So going back to the pie chart that Emmanuel showed, you will see a tiny sliver that's devoted to the emissions that waste produces. But if we think about how better to incorporate or measure greenhouse gas emissions resulting from food loss, we have to think about food loss or emissions that occur throughout the agricultural production cycle. And it's there where an estimated 85% of emissions from avoidable food waste occur in the upstream from the disposal decision. And attributions to reductions in methane emissions resulting from food waste reductions are only reflected in consumption-based accounting of greenhouse gas emissions. This is where the full supply chain impacts are actually captured. And what is consumption-based greenhouse accounting? Consumption accounting includes the greenhouse gases that were created during the entire life cycle of food during production, transportation from farm gate to end producer, and finally to the waste stream. Composting food contributes to soil productivity when utilized, but it doesn't negate the upstream impacts of greenhouse gases occurring in production, whether it's in Maryland, another state, or another country. So to be clear, what exactly is food waste? We can think of food waste consisting of two components: food scraps, which are the non-human consumption component of a food piece, such as the bones, peels, or shells, but then wasted food, which is the component that was produced for human consumption and utilizes scarce agricultural resources. And it's this food that this component that we're really concerned about. So to give you an example, in Oregon, its Department of Environmental Quality conducted a study to understand the causes and sources of household food waste as a fact-finding component of their own education campaign, the Bad Apple campaign. And it learned from this study that most of the wasted food was edible, and only the food scraps portion of food waste accounted for 30%. Responding how better to treat food waste, the EPA launched its wasted food scale, in which solutions are ranked highest from left to right, and prevention is certainly considered the highest return action, because food production requires enormous resource usage. When food is wasted, those resources are wasted too. Further right, we see composting, which keeps wasted food out of the landfill and generates soil production. So from the food scale, we see that attacking food waste requires multiple fronts. Many climate action plans include only strategies to compost or recycle. Tacoma Park waste actions. But ultimately, what I want to leave you with here is that ReFed and many other organizations rank public education campaigns as the most effective food waste reduction solution in terms of net financial and greenhouse gas benefits. So then looking at our own city, Tacoma Park is one of 5 municipalities in the county that collects its own curbside trash from single-family households and small multifamily units. This independence has afforded the city to be innovative. In 2013, it launched a separate food waste collection pilot and went to scale shortly afterwards. Based on a programmatic review, about 54% of the eligible households took up this intervention to participate in food waste curbside pickup. This resulted in a little over 300 tons of food waste diversion from trash when it was last during the programmatic review of 2021. However, over time, participation in the curbside program has remained about the same. This program also does not cover larger entities or businesses, similar to the recycling that goes on in this and how recycling is handled here. So here I'm just showing you in better detail how the program or collection evolved over time, starting with the pilot in 2014, and take-up increased really till about 2018. It dipped in 2019, and then the last data point there is from last year, 2023, where tons decreased to about 266 for the year. And we don't really know why this is happening. Did households drop off the program? our new residents participating, our households composting on their own, but frankly, even composters should still be participating in the curbside waste collection program. So as our vision, we want to increase food waste collection as a means to divert food waste from Tacoma Park's waste stream and decrease greenhouse gas emissions. But we want to also take an integrated approach to tackling food waste. We can do this through education that promotes behavioral change. We can do it with external funding. There are a number of sources that are available right now, so it's timely to consider how we can scale up our efforts to reduce food waste on a city level. There are a number of sources. For example, USDA will distribute $30 million over the next 3 years to address food waste for local municipalities. And we can think of this also as an equity issue. As I said, food waste at the household level costs households about $1,800 a year. We must commit to physically expanding the curbside program with current and future resources. And to ensure compliance, we must revise our city code. But we must do this with a timetable for completing our actions. Other national, so specific actions that we can address under these areas that I recommended would be specifically how to launch an information campaign. It would be first fact-finding to discover who in Tacoma Park is participating, why or why not. We would be asking them some questions about their food management strategies at home, and the demographics of participation and non-participation. We would be using this information to first inform the public, but we'd be also already at the beginning influencing behavioral change. And we would be using this initial information to then design future targeting strategies of how we would reach our most important groups. And then we'd be putting resources in place to scale up organics collection and participation. We have to review existing resources and operations to determine how to scale up the program. We've learned from our colleagues at DPW that the resources used to collect curbside food waste are pretty much at full scale. So we have to think about how we can better maybe use those resources, but also to inject more capital into potentially scaling up collection. And then eventually, to ensure participation, we would need to establish legislation that requires separate food waste collection of larger multifamily households and commercial entities that are out of scope of the current trash collection. And this would be a similar approach that the city used to get those entities to collect recycling separately from trash collection. And in terms of thinking of a public education campaign, there are many examples that we can build from. The EPA has launched 2 toolkits, one in 2016 and one most recently in 2023 that it's based on social marketing principles. The state of Oregon launched a very wide scale intensive campaign in 2017 called the Bad Apple Campaign with its own funding, own department funding. But it will be relaunching a campaign next year with both its own funding and EPA funding. But certainly in terms of the details, it's about developing a very interactive campaign with repeat visits, repeat interactions, and information provided in multiple ways. And this provides just some of the cost information for the current food waste collection program. These are based on 2021 data. And the total cost for the food scale, for the food waste collection was about a little over $77 $1,000, which is about $250 a ton. So this gives us a starting point for understanding how much it would cost to scale up collection. Oops. Oh, there should have been. Oh, and then finally, just to point out that there's many examples of food waste reduction efforts across the country. A number of municipalities and states have passed laws this past year making mandatory edible food waste recovery, diversion from organic waste. Oregon is an example that changed their greenhouse gas inventory to a consumption-based approach, and they used that new measure as a goal to divert 45% less food waste of 1990 by 2030. But most locally is the city of Laurel that only started curbside collection of food waste in 2019. But last year, the city council passed a resolution to make food waste compost collection mandatory across the city, and that will become effective in 2025 with escalation of fines for noncompliance. So, thank you.
Great. All right. Well, thank you all so much for your presentation and all of your hard work. I mean, these are some really excellent recommendations, and lots of research went into them. I see a lot of lights, so I'm going to kick it off with my colleagues, and then I'll close us out. Councilmember DeBala.
Yes, thank you very much to the entire committee for putting this together. I know not everybody's here tonight, but I gather this was a group effort. And just to clarify, so what I think you're suggesting is not that we stop doing the things that we're committed to doing, but that the committee is particularly interested in doing these two efforts under the Sustainable Maryland rubric, because we have to keep doing new things or we don't get points.
Exactly.
Basically.
We always need new actions.
And out of the universe of things, these are the ones that caught your attention. Okay, so that's a good context to know about. And I have specific questions for both of you, but just to say up front, that I think it makes sense for the council to, unless there's objections, for the committee to go ahead with the staff on the next step for each of these. And you've both very carefully outlined what the next step is. The first step is essentially research in both cases, and then maybe come back to us with some more detail about how it fits in with existing programs, how we could do some of the, how we would pursue the funding, et cetera. And I would suggest secondly that there's a couple of city staff working on grant funding right now, and perhaps it's time for the committee and the sustainability manager to meet with whoever else is working on grants right now, just to sort of alert everybody to what's out there. So that I'm starting with the end, but I might not get to the end with all these lights on. Specifically, question on EVs. One thing you didn't talk about was whether there were, I guess this is a question for the sustainability manager. Because we have a multifamily building renovation and electrification program. Does that already include the option for EV chargers to be part of that, or is that something we need to think about doing?
Good evening. Thanks. That's a really good question. Currently, the new multifamily building improvement grant, I will touch on this in my presentation too, is not providing direct funding for EV installation. However, we have gotten notification from different community partners that would be able to provide that funding if there was an alignment between the two organizations.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Great to know. And the other question I had about the EV chargers that we currently have, knowing that they're all from one contractor, are there any things that can be done to get them working? There may not be an answer for that right now, but you kind of mentioned it, and then
No, that's a really good question, and I think reaching out and having that discussion with the charging providers is one of the steps that we need to continue to do. From the feedback that I've received from RS Automotive, it may actually be something related to the utility and I guess the transformers, so that it's a complex system, so it may not be entirely in their control. Yeah,
Okay.
I'll stop.
All right. I'll let other people ask questions.
Councilmember Small.
Why, thank you, Mayor. I have like 3 different areas on this that I'd like to talk about while I have the floor. First one is that I appreciate the desire and the need to have a sustainable Maryland merge with what we are actually doing as a city. Because from a grander policy perspective, the continual march toward the goals of sustainable Maryland is reflective of good public policy. I know this because the city municipality I used to work for, we had gotten past goal and they were trying to figure out what they were going to do next with regard to sustainable Maryland, and in a committee or in a community that was supposed to be both economically depressed and melanin impacted. It was really kind of a disheartening thing to come over here and to see the profound disconnect between what we do as a city and what we should be doing in a policy area. And so I appreciate the fact that there is this goal to merge these things. And so I would like to begin with that. I have a couple of questions or notes about that in particular. First one being the lack of access for renters and homeowners without on-property parking. There's some complexities with regard to that, particularly when you start talking about larger multifamily homes. And when you start talking about chargers and grant money and availability, I'm always prompted to ask about where we are with regard to our relationship with our particular Pepco Exelon contact. Because in the previous jurisdiction that I had some municipality or municipal affinity toward, they were begging us to put those things in, and they were going to pay for all of them. So I don't know where we are on this side of the county with regard to those things, but I know for certain that there was a great deal of effort from Pepco and Exelon to try to make these things happen along the line, particularly when they were redoing some of the grid things with the larger outputs. I think also the last thing I would talk about is the walkable city density issues here. And this is an issue in particular that I do bring up a lot in the context of what we're doing here because of both the natural and economic division between 4, 5, and 6 and the rest of the community. More specifically, 5 and 6. Because you have to go over a bridge and go around a bunch of hills to get to where anything that is generally deemed important in the city is. And on the other side, where there's a lot of vibrant activity, there's really no appetite or inclination to put anything in over there that would connote these things. So I'm curious about where you find the ability to promote this structural equity, particularly since as the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments moves on these issues and talks about structural sustainability and sustainability equity, one of the biggest issues that we talk about is the reality of the infrastructure associated with aspirational desires to rewire, essentially, your entire internal infrastructure, put in natural gas vehicles all the way to electric vehicles, of huge structural apparatus without the ability to either procure those items or structurally support those items. And I would argue we probably even have some of those issues here with regard to Tacoma Park. And so I'm curious about how the melding of the realities of like what we're doing structurally at like COG, whether that be on environmental committees or on Region Forward, and what is by necessity a good idea for the city in a policy arena with regard to procuring of grants, which we can now get because we put that actual grant person in the budget. We made sure that person had jurisdiction over all of these places. So I'm curious about where the nexus between Sustainable Maryland, what we are actually currently doing, and what the vision for how equity would be applied in these areas would actually be, given the fact that we already have some structural inequality things with regard to the procurement of electric vehicles and their servicing in this area.
So the latter one, I'm gonna just punt over to our sustainability manager to some degree because I think there's a lot in that question that I think we as a committee haven't really discussed and don't know all the internal processes of the city and how they're evaluating all of that. So I'm just gonna punt that over to you. But for the first question, and I apologize, I just don't want to speak out of
You're not
turn.
doing anything wrong, and I encourage this. I like Sustainable Maryland, and I think
Yeah.
we should. I can't believe we're not gold. I just find that
Well,
hysterical.
that's really easy because there is no gold. Silver is the newest thing that they've, as of this year, developed. So we were the highest before, bronze, and now we're trying to go for silver.
I am fairly certain that we already had a silver designation in Capitol Heights, Maryland. And if there was a restructuring of this program that was outside of the bounds of just making sure that you go and get your little pin at MML, could be true. But as far as the actual accoutrements, make sure you have all those things in order. Maybe it's different on the other side of the street.
To your first question, as far as these early programs from the utilities, from the electric utilities concerns related to multifamily homes and so forth, a lot of those were pilot projects where there was a lot of funding available to deploy electric vehicle charging infrastructure at those multifamily homes early on. Many of those programs don't exist anymore. So they kind of transitioned into something else, and I think one of the partners that Dory is going to mention does some of that work now. They have funding to emphasize multifamily charging infrastructure build out. But I think what you referred to earlier, most of those programs I think have expired. But doesn't mean there's nobody stepped in there. Oh, sorry. Do you want?
Somebody else can have the floor back now.
I appreciate the question about equity. That's a really important component in all this. I think in the adoption of any new technology, there's a lot of push and pull that's needed. So in the sector of EV, it is not missed that there are already issues when it comes to EV adoption. And this is an opportunity for Takoma Park to really be a forerunner in pursuing the installation of chargers at multifamily properties. And we've been engaging with conversations from an entity called Avanza EV. They're a local nonprofit advocacy organization that has state funding. They received some of the CFI funds in the last round to do specifically the work of EV charger installations at multifamily properties. And they have a particular focus on properties that are highly concentrated Latino and low and moderate income residents. With the, and I should add that their head is also Latino himself. I met him on a panel that was hosted by the Maryland Clean Energy Conference, and you bring up very good points about how to overcome some of the inequities that already exist through these installations. It is not like EV chargers or the adoption of EV vehicles will solve those problems, but as the Avanza folks have pointed out, the purchase of a vehicle is, for many people, for us even, one of your most important assets. It is your transportation to work. It is essential, I would say, in a lot of parts of the country.
Or even in the words that are on the other side of the bridge.
Yeah, getting around is essential, right? And so catching folks at that moment and trying to convince them that this switch over to a fossil fuel-free vehicle is to their wallet's benefit, with all the incentives that Emmanuel mentioned, is one of the goals of this organization. And I think baked in that approach, it does address a lot of the equity concerns. And as Emmanuel pointed out, that would be the first focus of this request, is to focus on multifamily properties. I hope that answers your question.
Councilmember
Thank you, Councilmember Small. Councilmember Gibson.
Thank you. A lot of impressive stuff and a lot of impressive information and research that you provided. A couple of quick notes, because I don't want to, I think we're probably past our time already. The one charger at the junction, just FYI, is Ward 3. If I'm not mistaken, it may be at the old ward map. Just I happen to know that.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
it's the old ward map. That's right. It's
yes.
now in Ward 1.
Yeah.
You lost it.
Small thing. There was a mention, I think it was like 40% of the missions are through transportation. It said,
45.
do we have any idea how much of that is local generated versus just people passing through?
Yeah, the answer, I think, is that there was no way to tell.
So the way I understand it is that city emissions, so I think they're generated in this city. But I don't know that if it, yeah.
If you could hold that question, I have a slide addressing
Perfect.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. And then, again, on the EV, the current chargers, I guess probably those that are working, what's the utilization rate? Are they, I mean, how often are they used, and is there a need? I mean, I'll be frank about it. You know, you want to make sure those are fully utilized, I guess. But again, if they're not working, they aren't going to be used.
Right. I think it's a combination of that. Usually what industry says is when you reach about 20% utilization, you need to expand, because utilization is a tricky thing. You don't have a lot of people that are going to charge at 1 a.m. So in order to get 100% utilization, you know, you would have to have 24-hour charging every day. So it's not quite as easy. We would have to work with EVI to determine, because they would have that data. Nobody else would have that data in terms of utilization. I do walk past there every day because my son's daycare is just past that charging, that RS Automotive. And you do see a lot of times people charging. And the thing is, they're actually waiting in the car until they're charged. So I tend to sometimes talk to them and their experience and so forth. And they're fairly happy. And a lot of them are not from Tacoma Park, actually, which I was surprised by. They actually come to RS Automotive because it's more convenient or for whatever reason. But that's a really good question. I don't know that we can actually get that data because that really depends on the provider.
But obviously it has to do with your business model here.
Exactly right.
And with regard to both the business model for the compost collection and the EV, I guess I'd like to see just a little bit more of the costs, maintenance costs, administrative costs, whether there's any, I mean, what does it cost the city to do that? Apart from some initial investment, for example, in the EV, do the companies that run it, they bear all the costs, they bear all the maintenance, and we get, I guess, the good feeling of having, I mean, you know.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, no. So to answer the question, so the city, for the current charges that we have, as far as I know, the city does not pay anything for that. We were part of the grant application in 2018, I believe. That was a State of Maryland fund, a grant. And I think the collaboration was that the city and residents got 3 years of charging for free. And they got to, to install the charging infrastructure, and then after that, the charging installer, the operator, basically put in their business model and charges now a certain amount for usage. To answer your question, so there's no actual cost for the city to own or operate, but we're not owning it, so it's the third party that
just
owns
the
and operates it.
initial investment, I guess, to
Pretty
get it there.
much,
That's great.
exactly.
And then one last thing, there's going to the composting. I was asked, Ms. Estrada, about what it actually costs for us to do to pick up and deliver the composting, and I was told to look at pages 171 to 173 in our budget, and it was $294,000 for the recycling. So I'm 111. So that wasn't broken out. I referred to the pages that. So 111, and so I guess there is a cost.
There was a slide also.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry, I missed it then.
Can you
And
go
so
back one slide?
Thank you.
There it is.
Anyhow,
Nothing's
thank
free,
you
Councilman.
for, and I'm sorry I missed that. But I'm looking at cost per ton of waste. And then is there, presuming that we don't have all electric vehicles, we do have a greenhouse gas emission that we contribute to by driving around and picking up. Is that factored in?
So that, you mean factored in the current
In term,
greenhouse gas
how much
protocol?
greenhouse gases we're saving,
Yeah.
we probably have some expenditure.
Yeah, I mean, we do have a plan to try to electrify the city's
Sure,
fleet.
okay.
In terms of the cost, I don't believe that is a greenhouse gas emission we calculate at the city level. It would get lumped into the community-wide greenhouse gas inventory that is done by MWCOG. But certainly, yes, there is a cost. There's a carbon cost
I
associated
just,
with that.
thank you, and for us to track that. Thank you.
Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to all of you for the presentation tonight. Regarding the food waste, I think it's valuable. I know that a lot of our neighbors do participate in that program now, but it hasn't grown over the years. But yet we still have you can still apply for that and participate through our website. I'm just curious, I know that some of the recycling and waste pickup has some stumbling blocks along the way as far as where do we dispose of the what we pick up. And I'm just wondering if we have any of that. This is probably better for the Public Works Director.
For the food waste?
Pardon?
For the food waste part of
Yeah,
the pickup?
for the
That
food
goes
waste,
to
I wonder if
Prince
we have any issue with actually finding a home for that after we pick it
It
up.
goes to Prince George's County. That's where we take the food waste collection.
Okay.
And as a city, we pay $45 per ton for a tipping fee.
Okay, and they've been willing to take as much as we've been giving them?
Yeah, I don't think there's an issue with
Okay.
scale.
Okay, I know on some of the recycling, we have had some barriers, so thank you. That's all.
Councilmember Honzak.
Thank you. I guess, thank you so much to all of you for presenting and for doing all this work on these presentations. I just want to be clear that I really, really support sustainable efforts and efforts to move our city in that direction. Representing the ward that I represent in particular, I am concerned about equity issues as we look at these issues and kind of think about what the priorities for our tax dollars are as a municipality. I am very pleased that we have someone writing grants for us or trying to try to get those extra dollars, because I think that a lot of these kinds of efforts, personally, I believe that I'd like to see them coming from federal and state tax dollars and other sources that want to help us move in that direction. I'm excited to hear about Avanza, for example. When you talked about Avanza, Dory, does that mean that we would not need to pay as a city for that kind of program? Or is it like a complement matching funds?
That's to be determined. As Emmanuel pointed out, anytime the city is able to provide matching funds, it makes us much more attractive to do business with, so to say. With Avanza's opportunities, they actually are currently looking at multifamily buildings that meet that threshold for density of low and moderate income and high concentration of Latino tenants. Some fall in our boundaries, some do not. They're currently in a matching process right now, and we're working hard to see if there is a match in the city. That would be a wonderful start. They're not the only organization trying to do this kind of work, and there are other federal and state funds that are supporting this as well.
Okay, you mean so the match would come from the building owner, for example? Is that what you mean by that?
There are different structures. So NEVI is another one that was going to also point out in my slides. That requires a 20% match from the applicant. But those are those are state dollars from Maryland DOT.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess I just want to clarify a little bit. I think one of the factors, the structural factors that I see both in the EV world as well as food waste is, and I see it more acutely maybe in my part of the city, even in my own household, and I'm a single family household. There's a real divide. We just don't have that middle class here in the city. And so when you look at the economic choices or just the daily choices that a household is making to compost or to potentially buy an EV, the decision points are really quite different, I think, from some of our more well-to-do households. And time is really essential too. And I guess you were talking about doing surveys. I would strongly encourage you to dive down and do some surveys on what are the obstacles. When you did pick it up, what were the challenges that you encountered? Why haven't you yet purchased an EV vehicle, especially if you've made a purchase of an EV vehicle? My household made a purchase. We did not buy an EV vehicle, just to give you a sense. We're on the sort of lower end of the middle class in the town. There are a lot of reasons for that still, and I know we're trying to get over those barriers, but I think those practical realities are just really, really important to address and dive deep and not make the assumption, for example, that people might not want to do that, but really it comes down to economics, I think, a lot of time and money. And in the multifamilies, one of the things that I see frequently is for food waste, composting, for example, it's very, very difficult, to get that waste in a way where it's not going to be smelly or it's going to get, to be a hindrance to household functioning, to get it out to the places where it needs to go to be dumped. So I think there's just a lot of obstacles that need to be overcome before we consider how we move forward, or whether I think we've done the easy part. Now it's sort of, there could be a behavior change component as well as those pulling away at those things, and the progress will be slower. Anyway, that'd be my
I would just
impression.
like to say that that's why the city has a food waste curbside collection, because it isn't feasible for everyone to engage in composting at their house. They might not have the space, as you say, the time, and there is some technical details to make compost work. So, but to be able to, it's, with a city collection, it's about sorting your waste between food waste and non-organic waste. So that's a sort of an easier action, but thinking about how to reduce food waste is more of a behavioral change that will take a lot more work on the city's part to get people to reduce food waste.
Yeah. I guess I would love to even just walk someone through in certain parts of the neighborhood, certain households, how that really plays out. Have a few people show you what's happening. I can see all kinds of obstacles all around me with neighbors who have stopped doing it. So my kids refuse to do it. It's really, it's very interesting how it plays out, I think, in different kinds of households, and particularly those that have a time deficit and money deficits. I think there's a lot, and people who are inside of a building trying to look out. That's all. And so I just would urge you to do what you suggested on the surveys. And as such, at this moment in time, I personally would not support any kind of compulsory participation. Just want to lay that out there. I think that's going too far until we figure out how to overcome a lot of those obstacles. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak. Councilmember Fulcher.
On the EV front, is typically a heavy up necessary for adding a level 2 charger to a household?
It really depends. So a lot of these, and this goes to the previous comment, a lot of these are individual decisions. So for our home, when we installed a charger, we had a 200 amp large substation panel. We had to install a sub panel because we didn't have any more open spots, which adds considerably. Adds considerable cost. Generally speaking, with the age of the inventory of our homes, if they're not renovated in the last, I would say 20, 30 years, you probably have to upgrade to a panel, which is a considerable additional cost. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm just thinking even some of the smaller
multifamily buildings
Yeah.
in Tacoma Park. I think that that'll be one of the obstacles is helping them do the heavy up. You know, and maybe that's something that we would be looking to state delegates again to help us with figuring out how to make that process easier for our residents. And then, I'm sorry, do you have any idea like what sort of leverage we would expect with those dollars if we were to put aside that $50,000 for supporting EVs? Would we be expecting like dollar for dollar? Or are we thinking like, you know, better than that?
There's a few different programs open, so I actually don't have a good answer for that right now. Emmanuel did have, I think it is in your packet, a slide that I think outlines the cost of different types of chargers. And I think within the recommendation would be a combination of pursuing public entity chargers. It's come up, the topic of commercial in the Tacoma-Langley Crossroads area, for example, as well as pursuing these multifamily and doing partnership with private property. So I think those two scales are quite different. It's a little hard to say what the dollar for dollar match would look like. Yeah.
One of the slides said that there were 9 curbside charging permits that were issued by the city.
Mhm.
Was that over a time period of the last year or over the
Total.
total?
So the first curbside charger was installed in I think end of 2020, early 2021. And then this is the 8 additional ones until now.
Okay.
And I know that because I have permit number 1. So it's
Yeah. We'll talk about that. I'll talk about that off the dais for a minute. And then over to the food waste. I think that something that Director Braithwaite pointed out that Councilmember Siemens was asking about is it is kind of promising compared to a recycling program that we don't always know if someone wants to buy whatever we're recycling. And so, you know, when you're thinking about some of the downsides of recycling, you don't see the same thing from composting because they're always taking our compost and it's always getting composted. So that's good. Is there like a special type of dumpster that we're seeing other municipalities getting or recommending for businesses? Are they doing buckets at businesses? Because
I think there's probably dumpsters. We'd have to, I think that's what Laurel is talking about. There are dumpsters in the larger multifamily.
Okay, because I know that there's been some trash issues in the city, definitely this past summer. So just wondering about that. And then the cost per ton of food waste was about $250. What's the cost per ton of non-food waste?
Well, the tipping fee for non-food waste is $70. So to collect the regular trash, I mean, that's much more labor intensive than what's currently in deployment for the food waste collection. So there would be some differences there, but certainly the amount of trash dwarfs the tonnage that we're collecting in food waste right now. I think it's about 2,000 pounds was collected last year in regular trash. I think that's about right.
Tons.
I'm sorry, 2,000 tons.
Okay. And then is it more, what type of vehicle were you using to collect food waste?
Right now, it's a pickup truck.
So is there a better possibility for electrifying that vehicle as compared to those very costly trash trucks?
We would love that. They're quite costly, and if I'm not mistaken, it's not a normal pickup truck. We have a retrofitted loader on the back of it. Yeah, so it's a pretty expensive.
But less than like the, what was it, $400,000 for the dumpsters?
Yeah, it's a possibility. It's relatively expensive, and we're looking into it.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Great. So thank you so much. I appreciate you all sticking it out. I know that it's late. And the wonderful recommendations. One of the things, or a couple of questions that I have, because I promise you I'm going to get you out of here. I'm looking at the clock and I know we went over. as I was going through the recommendations, being mindful of what are the immediate things that we need to try to tackle, what are some of the more shorter term things, and then what are some of the longer term things. So for example, as I'm looking at the certification requirements for Sustainable Maryland, right? Like we have an application deadline that's June 30. So what are some of the main things that we need to do or to support you as a council in order to make sure that we're able to meet that specified deadline? Like, are we good right now, or are there other things that need to happen?
So we actually had a presentation from the leadership at Sustainable Maryland, and we went over sort of the point system that they've developed, and it was redeveloped over the last 4 years since we last did the application. Based on that assessment, and it was fairly high level, we should be able to get the silver certification just with what we've done. So, and you know, it's due in 4 months. So in terms of sustainability, it's not a lot that we can really pull off in that short a period of time. But I think that's really a time frame that we have, and we'll see when we get through the actual certification on how accurate that actually is. But we're fairly confident. Is I think 75%.
Okay. I would prefer it to be in the 80s, but I'll take 75.
81. Okay.
And so that's helpful. And so in terms of, as I'm looking through some of the, like the EV and the budget set aside proposal, one of the other things that has come to mind, I know that we've talked a lot about the multifamily buildings, and even if we're going so far as to talk about requiring the food composting versus allowing for EV chargers or promoting EV chargers in multifamily buildings, I think one thing that's important to keep in mind is not all multifamily buildings are the same. I hear regularly from condo communities that they pay city taxes, but they have to pay for their own trash pickup too. And so if we put certain requirements like that, it's not necessarily going to be, unless it's free, it's not necessarily going to be some big bad landlord that has to eat any costs. It could actually be our residents that have to pay a company to actually make sure that that happens. So has there been any initial thoughts, or is this something that could likely happen? It seems a little bit more clear cut for the EV chargers, because it seems like there may be some grant funds that maybe wouldn't necessarily be income based that would allow for condo communities or multifamily buildings that perhaps are not income restricted to be able to get those funds to get the chargers on their sites. But for like food composting, where they have to pay for out of pocket for all of their trash pickup and all of those things, has there been any thoughts around how to treat certain buildings, especially if we get to the point where we're trying to mandate certain things?
So on the
So if I could just say one thing. So part of what I talked about is focused on the current trash collection subscription. So that applies to single-family households and multifamily units that are fewer than 13 units. So those households do not have to pay to participate in food waste curbside collection. It's the other units that are greater than 13 and/or businesses that are doing their own private collections. So similar to recycling, the city enforces code that makes those units collect recycling separate from landfill trash.
Right.
So that would be the target group that we would have to think about would these entities absorb the cost.
Okay. So the in terms of short term, long term, short term, teach people about all of this, right? Because I think that's the major hurdle. And however we get to the point where we can actually figure out what people don't know, what's the right mechanism of communicating information to them to at least learn what we need to do to kind of get the word out more, teach them. And then the next phase is for those households, be it smaller multifamily buildings or single families, where we have the ability to control the pickup aspects. Once we get the word out, making sure that we have the capacity, expecting for there to be some increased participation in all of this, right? And then the longer term would be requiring those or figuring out whether or not it's feasible to require those that fall outside of the current capacity that the city or the authorities that the city has to collect. So it seems like that to me, at least on the food composting side, it's kind of what you're laying out, and I just want to confirm.
Yes, I would agree with you. That would be the sequence of events, that the public education would be used to inform the community, the entire community, on the impact of food waste on greenhouse gas emissions, and also the sort of the poverty and food security impact of throwing food away. It also then creates buy-in into the program, and part of that education would involve giving people the capacity to better manage their food at home, their food waste at home.
Okay.
So it's both the knowledge and awareness, and then capacity of how do I, given this impact both environmentally and on my own household budget, how do I better manage food waste?
Okay. So it seems like, more in the immediate term, and I'm kind of looking at Dory, and I said I was going to be quick, and I'm so sorry. Public education campaigns cost money.
They do. But there is a lot of money available right now through the program that was just released last December in USDA. There's $30 million that's available for education campaigns and other food waste activities. Also the pollution climate reduction grants that some either at Montgomery County or MWCOG may include food waste actions in their grants. So those are possibilities. There's certainly others out there, but I'm citing that as evidence that there is possibility to garner funds for this.
And that's really helpful because some of us sit on COG boards. So it's helpful for us to know that these are some of the things we need to be mindful of. And then switching over to the EV space, have you all looked into, and it seems like a similar thing, like on the EV side, it's you got to build it in order for them to come, right? So,
correct.
So how do we make sure that we have the resources available to match any grant funds that could help increase the capacity on the hopes that we will get more people that'll use, electric vehicles?
Reduce the entry barriers is really the important point, and that really speaks to your earlier comment. It's economical. Certainly the cars are expensive, and there are so many rebates now that it really helps. But then if you don't have easy access to charging, that breaks it for a lot of people. So trying to address that so you don't have that excuse. You may have 15 others, right? But that's the one way we can more easily address.
Okay. And then the education campaign again. Now, one other thing, have you all looked into public transportation at all? One of the things that slew of meetings I'm supposed to be a part of. So like the New Hampshire Ave, bus rapid transit, pushing to make sure that a lot of our buses that are coming through the city are actually, stopping and electric, right? So have you all talked about some of those? I think that might also kind of broaden our perspective as it pertains to some of the wards that, quite frankly, due to cost limitations, are more likely to ride public transportation, are less likely to own an EV due to cost constraints. So have you all looked into anything like that at all, or no?
Not so. Our focus was really more on the individual vehicle ownership. I think in the context of making sure that it was one of the slides, right, to ensure that public transit is on time, is reliable, is quick, and it's extremely important. We've not really focused on that. A lot of it, I think, is just the city doesn't really have the mandate or the authority because it's at the county's level. It's really exciting to see that Montgomery County is very proactive in pursuing electrification of transit. Not only do they have over hundreds of transit buses that are electric, they also have one of the few hydrogen fuel cell bus programs that they're going to roll out over the next few years. So there's a lot of activity there. So it wasn't part of our initial review and early recommendation, but it's certainly an important factor.
Great. Okay, so I know we have another presentation. Thank you all so much. I think in terms of next steps, because I do want to make sure that we are giving you all some direction, because you put in a lot of work here. So I would like to just ask my colleagues to take a look at the materials that we received today, and I'm hoping that we can come back next week, and I'm looking at the city manager, to provide this group with concrete council agreed upon action in terms of next steps. Yes, if you could send items to the city manager and CC me, and then that way we can make sure that we'll be prepared next week to give you all very specific council direction on next steps.
We really appreciate your time, and I want to thank our committee members and Dory and the whole city staff that has been really supportive of our efforts. So thank you so much for your time.
Great, thank you. And thank you for staying so late. We really appreciate it, and you all did an amazing job.
It's quite thorough. It's quite thorough. I appreciate it.
All
Except for
right.
the hydrogen fuel cell part.
Dory, you're next.
While we're waiting for the slide to get set up, slide table to get set up, I just wanted to take an opportunity to formally introduce our sustainability managers, thinking now we probably should have started with Dory and then moved to the Sustainability Committee. But a great pleasure to introduce Dory Estrada. She has been on board with the city since September of last year. In just barely 6 months, she's already brought the program back to life, and it's been a real pleasure to work with her. I'm looking forward for you all to get the opportunity to meet her, hear a bit about her vision, and she's going to be steering the sustainability ship for the city here for the hopefully foreseeable future. So with that, I turn it over to Dory.
Thank you, Daryl, and thank you, Council, for sticking it out with me. I know it's been a long night. But yes, it's a real pleasure to have met some of you already in person, and for those I haven't, nice to see you in person tonight. I'm Dorothy Estrada. Dory is what I go by, and I would be remiss if I didn't just also give kudos to Jeannie Mathias, who held this position for about 8 years before vacating it in October 2022. I think that the work that she and Daryl have done over that span of time has really laid a great foundation for the programs that we're going to be talking about tonight. So just really briefly, I'm going to try to cover a few different areas here. First, just giving a quick recap about our climate goals and our emissions profile, as well as our climate emergency framework update. I'll be touching on some of those new grant and funding opportunities that we just spoke about very briefly, covering partnerships, giving you a status update on some of our communications and outreach, and then closing with some budget implications. But just to set the context here, I think that I'm truly don't need to preach to the choir. Takoma Park has been long a leader in climate action, but I just thought that this graphic might provide some good setting of the table of the discussion, if we will, about what is at stake here when we talk about sustainability and climate change. Climate change is a mega problem. It touches everything else of the issues you see here. Wildfires, heats, ecosystem collapse, displacement of people, food insecurity. These are real. 2023 was, as you all know, the warmest year on record, and we can see the effects of some of these natural disasters that are climate induced in our own area, in the increasing heat of summers, in wildfires causing air pollution in our area, increased precipitation, and increased severity and frequency of storms. The list goes on. So, you know, this is truly a dire and real situation. And as you all know, since you passed an emergency declaration, this is requires all of our attention. And I'd just like to express that I think this council has also set a very good precedent by elevating the issue of equity. And I wanted to pull this because I think that it's worth noting here that the topics of climate change and climate work and equity are very much intertwined. They have mutual goals, and frontline communities, of which we have in our community, are the people who are most vulnerable to those effects, and it is our responsibility to make sure that we are moving in tandem with these two goals at once. So to recap where we are with our climate goals and priorities. As you all know, our city has a very assertive goal or aggressive goal to achieve net zero by 2035. This is very similar in nature to the Montgomery County goal, which is 100% reduction of emissions by 2035. And Maryland has a state goal of reaching a 50% reduction of emissions by 2030, which is based on a 2006 baseline. MWCOG has a regional goal of 50% reduction by 2030 and 80% by 2050 based on a 2005 baseline. And among your own council priorities from the last year, you have a mandate to focus on climate change mitigation, to work toward that net zero goal, to work on resiliency and improve our ability to adapt and be resilient to climate change, and to simultaneously manage our community's wonderful natural resources by protecting, maintaining, and improving the health of our urban forests, water quality, and with an emphasis on equity. To give an overview about our emissions profile, the latest data we have is from 2020. We will be receiving an update from the MWCOG greenhouse gas inventory going up until 2022 later this year. But as you can see, yes, as was pointed out earlier, almost half of our emissions come from transportation, with a significant percentage that comes from our built environment. And that is split between residential and commercial. And so we're talking in the realm of just shy of 130,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalent. And that is a significant amount of carbon for a city of our size. If you're like visual like me and need to see what that looks like, that is what 1 ton of CO2 looks like. It's the equivalent of refueling an SUV 46 times. It's 428 liters of gasoline. It's 40 propane tanks. It's a lot. So it's a massive goal we have on our hands here, but one that is not unachievable. So just to show some of our progress that we've made, since 2005, the city of Tacoma Park has been successful in decreasing its emissions by about 27%. And you can see here among the various categories, for example, transportation has seen a pretty severe reduction, as has our building sector as things become more efficient. And among the inventory data we receive is also just some data sort of charting what those sources of increases and decreases have been. As we have seen a growth in our commercial space over the years, an increase in population and an increase in hydrofluorocarbons, that's what caused it to go up. But we've also seen a decrease as the grid of electricity has gotten greener. People have reduced the miles they traveled, especially during the pandemic time, and there's just been a decreased commercial electricity intensity overall in the city. We do have some new data, just to point you to. This comes from the Google Environmental Insights Explorer, which is a city emissions data tool that was developed by Google Maps to track transportation and building data with emissions for individual cities. We're currently working with them to achieve a data set that focuses on Tacoma Park and Silver Spring. We can't isolate Tacoma Park, unfortunately, because it does need to have a metropolitan area of 30,000 or more, but that will still be telling. Right now, what I'm showing you is from Montgomery County at large up until 2022. And Here we can see the inbound and outbound emissions from transportation, which were up 8% from 2022. In 2022 from 2021 levels. This is no surprise as the traffic has increased post-pandemic and people are returning to work. And the estimated in-boundary emissions from the whole county were 1,230,000 tons of CO2 equivalent. In the building sector, we can see here that there are higher concentrations in non-residential buildings. I think that should come as no surprise. They're usually larger. So these numbers represent about 65% from residential emissions and 34.3 from non-residential emissions. In Tacoma Park, this is slightly different, but overall, we're looking at a total metric tons of around 5,280,000 emissions from the county. And finally here, just wanted to share that the COG region overall has actually made incredible progress on this. They met both the 2012 and the 2020 goals. And emissions from the building and transportation sector saw a greater reduction than anticipated due to the 2020 pandemic. So, they are also working toward this aggressive 2030 goal. And it is everyone's hope, I think, in the region that we are doing whatever we can to make sure we meet that mark. So I'll just be touching on a few different things here related first to the topic of buildings and our work at the city level. So we have been actively engaging with the new BEPS law that was passed, which regulates that buildings over 25,000 square feet should do this mandatory benchmarking. The building we're in right now falls into that new regulation, and we're currently benchmarking this building. As you all know, we have a major construction project on our hands that has made things a little bit complicated with the new library. So the benchmarking we do will, of course, have some irrelevancy once the new library comes online. But right now, we are receiving guidance and mapping that on Energy Star Portfolio Manager. We have also taken a strong emphasis on solar education and clean energy attainment for residents, and this goes for both homeowners and renters. There will actually be an event in this room on March 12th on that very topic. Hopefully, Delegate Charkoudian will also be giving an overview about the new community choice energy topic for the general public on that evening. Additionally, as many of you all know, we launched a new grant program that is a collaboration with the Housing and Community Development Department called the Multifamily Building Improvement Grant. This is also a partnership with the Montgomery County Green Bank and is an extension of the last few cycles of multifamily grants. It's a strategic decision to focus on multifamilies for several reasons, but we're really excited because the grants under this new program are very substantial, and already since it is open a few weeks, we've gotten a few applications rolling in. The maximum award is $250,000 with a 30% match. And lastly, the city had conducted a feasibility study with ACEEE on the topic of perhaps installing a BEPS type requirement for buildings that fall under that $25,000 square foot threshold that is part of the county-wide BEPS. This is still under review. It would need some tweaking, but this is a very interesting concept because it would allow us to have some mandatory requirements for buildings that are still large enough and have substantial emissions, which, as you all saw, is a pretty big part of our emissions overall. On the topic of transportation, I won't linger here since I think you all got a very good deep dive from Emmanuel's presentation on EVs, but we do continue to do outreach and participation in that curbside permitting for EVs that you heard him speak about. We are also still working on the city's fleet transition plan so that we can have an all-electric fleet by 2035. This would mean in its latest version that we would not purchase any fossil fuel powered vehicles past 2028, and that we're actively looking at the options to have additional charging infrastructure for those vehicles. We have learned that some new police pursuit-rated vehicles that are electric have recently come online, and we're hoping that those would be available for us to consider for the police. I'm sorry?
Do I get to share now?
Oh, yeah, sure. It's very exciting. It's very cool. And that just means that they have met, certain pursuit rated standards. And what is also very exciting that you can maybe share about is that the IRS has a new allowance for municipalities to pursue direct pay. This means that the city gets a certain percentage of its investment in these types of vehicles back, which is a very big deal, and we're already pursuing that for the Chevy Bolt that was purchased last year. And I just wanted to share some news at the county level here, which is that Montgomery County Public Schools just received an EPA grant of $4.7 million to purchase 50 clean school buses as part of the Clean School Bus Program. So hopefully some of those will also be rolling around town, and that's a big win for the county, and especially because they'll in close proximity to schools and students. So it's a great learning opportunity. On the topic of multimodal transit, I know that this point was also just raised. Just wanted to give some of the highlights also from our community housing and community development department. The new Ave Bikeway project that's planned for New Hampshire Avenue has been successful in obtaining both COG and state awards to support this work. The Maple Ave connectivity project is underway, and RK&K was selected as the project consultant, and they've begun meeting with city staff to build on the engagement strategy that they set up last fall. In September, the city was awarded an MDOT grant for the Bikeways Network program and for the Metropolitan Branch Trail update, which will allow the city to complete a design and then seek additional funding. And there are 53 bike racks have been purchased from 2022, and those are slowly being installed and deployed one after another in every ward of the city. And focusing on the topic of renewable energy and our fossil-free community, there is a new program that was launched last year from Montgomery County called Electrify MC. This is providing direct incentives from the county to homeowners who are electrifying various appliances in their home. We have been a partner in outreach at the city level. This program is still running, but we do expect to have some data on the number of residents that participated in the coming year. We also have been very assertively pushing the word out about the number of federal electrification incentives that are available due to the Inflation Reduction Act. One great tool that I've taken a screenshot here is the IRA calculator tool. That's a really great resource. We've pointed several residents to help them better make sense of this vast landscape of new incentives. And we're also going to be very assertively pointing folks to a new event that is happening on April 6th. I have a separate slide about this, called the Healthy Homes Fair, hosted in DC. It is for residents across the region. It is the first of its kind event focused explicitly on the topic of home electrification and what that means for your health and your wallet. The Montgomery County Community Choice Energy Pilot is a huge deal. This would be, Maryland, I think, is only the 9th state to pursue this legislation. The pilot is moving forward, and we are still awaiting word from Montgomery County about exactly when that would start. But as soon as we do hear for sure, that will be a very high priority on our agenda to spread the word about and help people understand how that can help them achieve 100% renewable energy for their home. And as you all have been discussing, Montgomery County passed gas-powered lawn equipment ban, which would prohibit sales starting from July 1st of this year. There are also several updates on the topic of natural resources I'd just like to give an overview about. On the topic of stormwater, the city has been working with the Low Impact Development Center to conduct a resiliency study for stormwater. And simultaneously, the My Rain Plan tool has been made available on the website to help homeowners better understand stormwater on their private property. There will be a third community meeting about stormwater in the near future. And additionally, the Tacoma Branch Stream Restoration Project was completed a few months ago. This is at the intersection of Poplar and New Hampshire Avenue. Brashear's Run Outfall Project is expected to begin. It's currently out to bid. And there will be a Houston Avenue Filterra project that's currently in the design phase, but will be out to bid and will be built before the end of fiscal year 24. For urban forestry, our urban forestry manager, Marty Fry, has produced the 2023 report, which indicated that 24 trees were planted in public spaces, but 279 were planted on private property as part of the Tree Tacoma program. 53 were part of the removal permit and replacement. And overall, the forest canopy remains impressive for an urban community like ours, so that is pretty commendable, and that the rate of tree loss compared to the previous year has decreased substantially.
Wow.
And lastly, on the topic of environmental restoration, Anna Mishi John's team has been working very intensely at Circle Woods. They have been, they've completed the invasive removal as part of the PEPCO grant work. And some of the planting will be done this March. Signage is also being installed. They are going to be beginning work at Stuart Armstrong. This is also a grant-funded project, and it will begin with an invasive removal. And there's continuous removal of invasive and horticulture species from several designated sites in the city. And I would just add that these are the foci of other Department of Public Works staff, and I just wanted to thank them for providing this data. To touch on grant programs very briefly, so as many of you know, the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, was signed into law in August of 2022, and it's the largest investment toward addressing climate change in U.S. history. Approximately $369 billion in energy security and climate change programs is going to be funded over the next 10 years. This is a big, big deal. So as it was mentioned, I think by Janet, there is a new funding pool that is from this pot of money in the IRA called the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant, CPRG. This is a little bit complex, but this is excellent funding that is aimed at helping local governments implement ambitious plans to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The city is planning to join coalition applications with both Montgomery County, the MWCOG, and potentially the state of Maryland, and that will be coming due this spring. Maryland Energy Administration continues to offer several grant opportunities in the areas that fall under the focus of our programs. We submitted an application to their OPEN program, which would support direct tenant engagement at multifamily properties, and we're hoping to loop this in direct relation to the current multifamily building improvement grant, and tenants would receive education about healthy homes and how to obtain clean energy. We are going to be pursuing an additional grant for our solar expansion on top of the new library from another MEA funded program as well. I think I just touched on the elective pay allowance, so I'll kind of skim over that, but this is currently being pursued, and it's a collaborative effort between our Department of Public Works and our Finance Department. And lastly, also, I believe this was touched on, but NEVI is the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, and Maryland Department of Transportation is the administrator of these funds. Round one of this funding just opened, but the city is not in a high priority corridor that would be qualifying to apply. So we're going to look into applying for their community charging that will be part of round two that should open later this year. And I believe I mentioned that we're actively pursuing partnership with Avanza EV and trying to link with some of the properties that they've identified in the city. So just to take a pause here, I know that was a lot of information, But turning to the people power that is required for these efforts, I just wanted to highlight this quote from Governor Wes Moore, who was making an announcement recently at the Frederick Douglass Tunnel project in Baltimore, which is funded by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act. He said, "It's not enough for people to see themselves in the consequences of climate change. They need to see themselves in the promise of climate action." And I just wanted to say here that I think it's easy to get overwhelmed when we think about the massive amount of progress that we still need to make. But there's so much to gain in terms of opportunities, from jobs to building up the vibrancy of our community, to better health outcomes and much more. And this work has been and always continues to be a movement that really requires all hands and robust partnerships in order to achieve those common goals. So with that being said, it's been a very high priority in me stepping into this role that we activate those strong partnerships at the community level. Just wanted to start here with a very wonderful opportunity that's come up with Chesapeake Conservation and Climate Corps. This is a program that's managed by Chesapeake Bay Trust, and the city was successfully selected as a host organization. And we're awaiting a match with a pending Corps member who would be hopefully based in our local area. They would be placed with the city in, it's essentially AmeriCorps, but for environmental work, they would be placed with us from August of this year until August of next year. This is a no match requirement, and it is completely funded by Chesapeake Bay Trust. And since stepping into the role in September, I've had several introductory calls and meetings with a variety of environmental and sustainability focused organizations. I won't list them all, but just wanted to give you a snapshot of, who we anticipate working with. And I would just like to say that I think all of these groups play a very important role and are critical to the success of our programs and our sustainability goals. In the topic of communication and outreach, if we don't measure it, we can't manage it. So I think that this is also a really critical part of the work that's ongoing in our office. With the role being vacant, there's been a lot of kind of cleaning out the cobwebs, so to say, of some of the accounts and newsletters. The newsletter was reactivated this fall, and it's seen a growth to 927 subscribers and just 60 new subscribers since the last issue. We've also seen an increase in open rate, which is very good news. That means people are actually actively looking at the information our department is putting out. And we've been working with our excellent communications team to make contributions in the city's podcast, newsletter, and other communication channels, social media, et cetera. But along with that, very aware of the need for more equity-focused outreach and multilingual outreach. So this is, I think, on a personal level, I've had a lot of takeaways from a recent conference I attended that focused a lot on this topic, especially for our Spanish-speaking community. And I'm going to be linking up with some more environmental partners from that space to get a better sense of how we can have more targeted outreach that reaches sort of those residents who often are not present at events or, haven't been showing up historically in the past. And I think the colleagues did an excellent job of talking about Sustainable Maryland, so I won't linger here either. We will be working toward that, that new silver status, and our application will be due in June 2024, June 30th to be exact. And an annual reporting that the city has also been responsible for is CDP. This is the Carbon Disclosure Project. We have reported on this platform since 2018. The city received a score of a C in 2023, but we just recently had a call to discuss our areas for improvement. Our report for them will be due in 2024. CDP is a bit different from Sustainable Maryland. It focuses very much on our greenhouse gas inventory and our measures for adaptation and mitigation strategies. It's much more honed in on those topics. And I would just like to also share that we've got, with the pandemic subsiding, we've got a lot of events returning. Well, the first one is not an event. That's the flyer for the Conservation Corps program. Applications are due on March 7th. All of that is administered by Chesapeake Bay Trust. I have some flyers with me for these programs as well. The one on the right is the solar information session I mentioned that will be in this room on March 12th. And this is the flyer for the Healthy Homes Fair on Saturday, April 6th. This is at the DC Armory, and it's expected to have quite a large attendance. Again, while it is in DC, we would not be able to host an event of this scale at our city, and it is definitely better that we build up linkages with folks like Electrify DC. I've spoken with other municipalities, and they intend to have a presence there as well. And lastly, we're quite excited about this one. We are intending to host an Earth Day celebration at the Sligo Creek Stream Valley Park on April 20th. Currently waiting on a final confirmation from Montgomery Parks, but it's looking very positive. And we feel that this would be a wonderful setting to build on and bring in some of the common environmental and sustainability organizations together in one outdoor space. And just kind of coming to a close here to discuss about the budget implications. So specifically, our department will be seeking support for a full-time intern in the next fiscal year, who we think that would be essential to lead some of this outreach and engagement that you've heard from the 2 recommendations to Sustainable Maryland, along with a lot of the ongoing programs that we have that I've currently covered. We also would be seeking support for special events funding, as you saw some of the events coming up, which have started to return post-pandemic. In terms of cost efficiencies, this is something we have a very keen eye to with things like the Chesapeake Conservation Corps member program. As I mentioned, that is a no cost and added capacity for our department, as well as building on existing programs and no cost technical assistance. For example, we participated in a climate action boot camp that was immensely valuable in understanding the landscape of federal funding, and that was a free technical assistance provided by National League of Cities. And I just would like to close by saying I think that some people are calling this a once-in-a-generation funding, and I think that's true in the breadth of time that I've worked in this field. I've never seen such a groundswell of funding and support for climate action, and I think now is the time to build on that momentum. I believe we should be aggressively pursuing these grant funds to support our clean energy projects. It's those macro level funds that immediately make our micro level solutions possible, and that those grant dollars are critical for us to put those emission reducing technologies and help us reach our net zero goal. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Great. Thank you so much. We really welcome, I know we've said this before, but it has been very refreshing. The loss of Gina was a huge gap in our agenda as a city, and your arrival has just completely, in the short amount of time that you've been here, filled the hole. And so I am so grateful to have you in the city of Takoma Park. And like you mentioned, this is once in a lifetime opportunity for grant funds. And so I'm super excited that we have people that are monitoring that and seeking out those dollars, because I think that's going to be the only way that we're going to be able to advance. Council Member Small.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to say a couple of things because this is the first official time that you've actually been in here. You might have seen the videos or whatever, but please don't ever take me moving around or asking something semi-pointed as anything personal. Like, I don't know when I am being too pointed, and I have a chronic illness, so it makes me make faces and whatnot. So please don't regard any of those things as indicative of any given thing. I do have a question, however, and it is related to the nexus between the grant funding and grant writing and where you find your personal workflows and processes. I only bring this up again because last year during the budget cycle, we had a semi-acrimonious conversation in order to establish the fact that we would have a grant writer that would have some sort of overall nexus between a lot of these departments. And so I'm curious about if there is a natural working relationship or what the dynamic is on where you think we should be getting more actual money, as in written grants that are potentially matched by city resources from point A to point B.
Great question. So I myself have about 10 years of grant writing experience, both federal, private foundation sector funds. I am well versed in the language of grants. Patty Mallon coming on as the full-time grant writer is a huge asset for the city. The recently submitted open grant from MEA was an excellent collaboration between HCD and our department, where she was right in the middle managing process and content for that grant. I would say going forward, we absolutely want to work in collaboration with her. It's still part of an ongoing discussion with HCD about how best to manage her time, which is pulled in, I think, a lot of different directions and a lot of varying deadlines. For example, this solar grant that's coming up, I think, is mostly something that our office would be able to do independently with her eyes on it. And I think that's kind of the flow as I see it now, where having a full-time grant person is, again, a huge asset, but it really is probably going to pull on a bit of my role, which I think that's fine. I mean, I'd rather us, with grants, as you all know, I think it's always a toss-up. It's not guaranteed money. It is competitive. It's hard. So, it's always an ongoing discussion about the pull on staff time and the investment in network versus our other duties. But in this case, when we have such an excellent match between some of our programs and some of the money that's out there, this is really too good to pass up, and it's kind of a worthwhile investment of our time.
I think that's a wonderful answer, and I think the only thing I would charge you with is the knowledge that if you, like the technical capacity and technical expertise of a finite group of grants means that you can get frisky on the overall grant statement and be chunky with all of the data that you are already compiling. So good luck to you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hey. Councilmember Gibson?
Yes, I just wanted to, first, a lot of good information. Thank you, and a lot of good work, and it's good to have you on board. I want to follow up on Councilman Small's question about your role, and I'm remembering perhaps it was Daryl that talked about there's also the management. You can grant write, but the managing, the reporting, the monitoring, all of that, and how does that play out? Does the grant writer, or if they're an HCD, does HCD do that, or we have? I'm just kind of curious about that, and I have a follow-up question. But if you would.
Also a good question. I would say that this is still part of an ongoing discussion, as we haven't received any grants yet. And I would just say, for example, each of these different categories of grants have different requirements. The MEA grant that we've just submitted, I am under the impression does not have stringent reporting requirements, so it's a relatively lighter lift for staff. But then, as you all are probably aware, federal grants have extremely stringent reporting requirements and are a pretty big load to bear, although they are worthwhile because the grant dollars are usually much more substantial. I would say in order to handle that, it's definitely an ongoing conversation about how we manage the work with Patty for submission, and then reconvening as a team if dollars are granted, but that whenever possible, working with partners to kind of disperse that workload. The CPRG that I mentioned, that massive EPA funding opportunity, would be a pretty big dispersal among several partners, and it's not my impression that the city would be the one dealing with reporting. It would more likely be our folks at Montgomery County, which is wonderful. That's the golden scenario where the city benefits from federal grant money, but is also not bearing the responsibility of a lot of this management and reporting, and gets to just use it for implementation. So finding those types of opportunities is, I think, definitely the top priority.
Right. Just a quick technical question that I know that you've been asked by one of our residents with regard to our use of COG numbers for the greenhouse gases versus CADMAS, the reporting and the contracting agency that we paid a considerable amount of money for. Can you speak to why, I guess Professor Krotowski was recommending that CADMAS had a little bit more transparency in terms of finding out the assumptions underneath these, the reports and the reporting, whereas the COG is a little bit more opaque. You have,
I'm sorry, Councilmember Gibson, that's a really nuanced question. I think it might be beneficial to provide that in writing, given that we're over
well,
time.
then I'll just say I'll raise it. I know that's been raised with you, and we'll get offline and we can talk some more about that.
Yeah, I mean, just to provide a high-level answer, the Cadmus data is several years old at this point, and the data I showed you from COG does go up until 2020. I believe the last reporting year of the Cadmus is 2018, if I'm not mistaken. So I wanted to, bring in, of course, the most relevant up-to-date data. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And just as a reminder for my colleagues, we are over time. Councilmember DeBala.
I was just going to say thank you for for an excellent presentation, and given the hour, I am not going to torture you with questions. Yeah. And just to say also that, as I understand it, the COG data at the city level coordinates, then tiers up to the whole region. Mm-hmm. And so it's not just Tacoma Park, it's every community
oh, I know,
and county in the region that does it this way. Mm-hmm. But thank you very much for a fascinating evening. I'm looking forward to following up.
My pleasure.
Great. Well, thank you. I feel like this was your first time before council, but given the plethora of projects that are on your plate, it will not be the last. And we look forward to receiving updates as you all are working through the portfolio. One thing that would be helpful, it seemed like there was a couple of budget-related items, and just kind of following up with the city manager about making sure that we have an ability to be able to make those connections when budget work sessions and things begin.
Yes, thank you for flagging that, Madam Mayor. I think any questions that do have budgetary implications, it's extremely timely right now, both in terms of being responsive to you, but also in terms of flagging for us the kinds of financial, what financial elements to these policies and projects you're most interested in. And as we're still compiling the proposed budget for FY25, it would be very helpful to have those questions, and we'll do our best to get answers out to everybody.
Great, thank you so much. All right, well, I was trying to get you out before 11, but I failed by 10 minutes. But seeing that we have no more lights, I just want to move for us to adjourn. Do I have a second? All right, thank you all so much. Have a good night.